Superman 3 is a strange beast of a movie. Half the film's a Richard Pryor comedy, whilst Clark is visiting Smallville. Once we get more serious Superman plots, there are some things to enjoy, but much of it will definitely leave you scratching your head. I'll say this though, it's never not interesting. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I just don't believe a man can fly.
This is a movie podcast, and we are working our way through Superman season on the way, building up, of course, to the brand new film coming out from James Gunn. But today we're on week 3, and that means Superman 3 from 1983. If I say 3 one more time, I'm going to be melting or something. Welcome everyone to the show. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to the spoilers. And if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support the show over at Patreon and get some bonus stuff, but I'll tell you more all about that at the end of the episode. All right, all the housekeeping and preamble out the way. We're here to talk about such a silly movie. Like, we're here today to talk about green and red traffic light men fighting each other and all sorts of shenanigans that we're going to get into. So, buckle up.
Yeah, you did. I take it you didn't take this for the piece of art that it truly was underneath.
Like, I'll get into my proper thoughts in a second. But how much of this had you seen before? Was this like a first time voyage?
Yes. So we went over this a little bit at the end of Superman 2, but after having seen it now, I realized that from this movie, I have literally only ever seen 2 scenes. And they are not critical to the plot. They are absolutely just little flavor scenes that are thrown in for the side of it. So I really didn't know anything about this going in.
All right, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching this. I had this on tape. Taped off TV, like most movies. I had like maybe 3 purchased VHS as a kid, and everything else was taped off TV. It's just the way things were. So
you're the reason that the movie industry never took off in Scotland, all your piracy.
Oh, I'm sorry, taping off TV was considered piracy?
Absolutely.
No, it was not. Under no circumstance.
I mean, I couldn't tell you. I think that there probably was some executive at some point who was like, how do we stop them from taping off the TV? They
hate it. Don't get me wrong. I am sure the movie industry absolutely hated that people could just do that. But, like, you know, they put up their movie right fees for TV broadcast probably and just called it a day, because how are they going to fight it?
Right.
Obviously, encryption with modern cables, with modern formats have made it much more difficult to do. So.
Yeah. I had the weirdest experience, just as a side tangent. Do you remember that scene from Superman 1 of him going underneath like the continental shelf and lifting it back up?
Of course I do. It was beautiful.
And, like, it was it's a beautiful shot. Well, I was like, I have a Apple Watch, and I was like, I really want to set that frame as my background to my watch. Like, I think it's just like the time can go up in the top where the shelf is. It's just a perfectly fitting thing. So I went onto Max and I tried to take a screenshot of it, and it just blacks out the screenshot.
Yep.
Like, yeah. I could not do that, and that was such an annoying thing to me because all the YouTube uploads were in like 360p.
Yeah, a lot of the streaming apps and software now can detect if you're doing any sort of screen capturing. It'll just make it go black while you're trying to. So there's a lot of that now to sort of stop that. Obviously, they've accepted DVR when that became a thing. But of course, DVR, like, you run out of storage and you have to delete things. So it's not this like constant library you're building in the same way that VHS and even recordable DVD. Not that recordable DVDs were a big thing, but you could do it. The technology did exist if you wanted to. But anyway, we're going way off track here. We're here to talk about Superman 3. We're here to talk about the Richard Pryor guest starring Superman movie that we've got here.
Yep.
And we're going to get into it. So, I mean, honestly, trying to summarize the plot of this is actually kind of insane because it goes places. Like, the plot in the back half of the movie is nothing of what you expect it's going to be based on the first half of the movie. I mean, I don't remember a time when I hadn't seen this, so I always know where it's going. But when I stopped and thought about it about half an hour in, I'm like, wait, we still have to get to this bit and this bit. How do we get there? How do we get there from here? There was a feeling of that as I was watching it.
Let me be clear with the audience here. This is a perfect example of a daisy chain plot where A leads to B and B leads to C, but there is absolutely no understandable way that A could ever lead to C. Like, it is 100% just a chain of things that cause the next thing, but there is no forward thinking. There's no way you can predict where the movie is going based off of how it begins.
No. So, I mean, I guess we'll just start with a simple question and we'll start digging into the spoiler-free thoughts and whatnot. So, David, how did you feel about Superman 3?
I think that in terms of being a Superman film based off of the previous two, this is missing about every mark I could possibly give it. There is nothing here.
There's a butt coming. It sounds like a butt's coming.
There is a butt. But if I look at it strictly as a comedy, it's passable. I think there are enough jokes in here that are actually okay, that it's not a horrifically unfunny mess. It just doesn't belong in a Superman franchise.
Yeah, this is a weird beast of a movie. It's half a Superman movie. It's half a Richard Pryor comedy. It's full of just nonsense. Like this is a time when computers could magically just do anything because people don't understand them. So there's a ton of that in here, which we're not going to talk about what any of them are yet. We'll get to it in spoilers.
All right, fine. Fine. I don't think it's a spoiler, but I just love there's one particular part where he just writes out a command and like AI of modern day, it just understands and does it. And I'm like, wow, how forward thinking of computers. Yeah,
it's full of that kind of stuff. It's not a good movie, right? It's definitely not a good Superman movie, and I think that there's a large case to be made that it's not a good movie in general. However, there's a combination of things here that mean that I always kind of enjoy watching this. A big part of it is absolutely nostalgia, because I grew up watching this, so I have weird memories of just random bits in this that as I look at them as an adult, I'm like, it's weird that this random 5-second bit's in this movie. Like, why is this bit here? Like, the weird, vague, like, deja vu, I forgot about this, but now it's flooding my memory again, and, like, this is so out of context, of a man picking up a fruit and just smooshing it onto his wife's nose, and I'm like, if you'd shown me this still, of this moment, I'd be like, okay, I know I've seen this movie, I can never have told you in a million years it came from Superman 3. It's just this random occurrence, and the context of it's just absurd. So, like, it's got all that, but I will maintain that there's one or two legitimately great scenes in this movie. One or two.
I would agree with one. I think you'd have to make the argument for the second one. I'm not sure where you would be getting the second one from.
I'm not even sure what I mean, to be honest. But there's definitely a few moments throughout the movie where I went, you know what, there's something almost here. They've almost got something in this scene or this idea or whatever. But it is few and far between. The structure is absolutely nonsensical. The fact that this movie opens, instead of the classic, Superman text flying towards the screen, it's a comedy slapstick montage with text just sort of kind of awkwardly sliding at the bottom of the screen to be vaguely Superman-esque, but it looks really bad.
I mean, look, because it's not a spoiler, because we're talking about it here, there is one, it's all slapstick, but there is one specific bit where a blind man is, like, there's a man down in a hole and a blind man steps on his head and then steps over the hole. However, at the exact moment they chose to do that, they chose to have a title come in and completely block the entire slapstick bit of him stepping on the head. And all I could think is no one was caring at this point. Like, it was absolutely just, yeah, whatever, this sequence is happening, throw up whatever titles we can.
Yeah, also, because of this effect they've got on the titles, it blurs the entire bottom half of the screen where the text is. Like, whatever, like, compositing they're doing to make the text appear, it's blurring half the frame. It's really clunky, does not look good. And that's just how the movie starts. That just gives you like a sense of like what we're going for here. I think the title Superman 3 and a little bit of the John Williams like theme plays after Jimmy gets a hot dog. I think like it's not even like a moment where something heroic happens or like after he's shown up and saved the day. Jimmy got a hot dog. Superman 3, everyone, welcome to the theater.
It's the American way.
So you've got that, and then you've got the fact that clearly someone wanted to make a Richard Pryor movie. Now, it is a gift to this film that Richard Pryor is actually a hilarious man who knows how to deliver things in a way where he's still consistently pretty funny regardless of the material. Because there's lots of moments in this movie where he was making me chuckle just because of the way he would react to something or stumble over himself or whatever. The man was a comic genius, and it's like I mean, it doesn't belong in a Superman movie, but he's here, so I'm enjoying the entertainment value at least.
Yeah, this strikes me. It doesn't happen very often in comics nowadays, but I definitely have read a bunch of like Bronze and Silver Age, or more or less just seen the panels of them coming in, where there are references to real life people. And this, it's not the same because obviously he is playing a character. He is not just Richard Pryor here, but it kind of felt that way because he is kind of still just Richard Pryor here. He is still kind of like the stand-up comic who's just able to make anything funny. And it just kind of comes across as that Superman meets Richard Pryor rather than Superman's starring Richard Pryor.
Yeah, and then the villain is basically just another Lex Luthor. Although, in a weird way, he's actually closer to what I think of as Lex Luthor than the Lex Luthor we had. Not so much in personality, but just in the sense that he's a businessman who's a millionaire, and he's trying to make more money, and he's like that side of it feels a bit more like traditional Lex to me, or at least what I think of Lex than the Gene Hackman version. But it is kind of funny though that that's what they fell back to is we'll just have another rich man who's kind of evil.
Yeah, I mean it's easy if you bounce back. Honestly, if you look at it from the perspective of the series, it's just bouncing back and forth between rich guy and then someone with Superman powers, just over and over again.
That's a tease for Nuclear Man in the next film.
Yep.
Notice the pronunciation of Nuclear Man.
Nuclear, absolutely.
Not nuclear. Nuclear.
Nuclear. Yeah.
What is it with the big actors, Brando, then in the next one Gene Hackman just pronouncing words weird?
I don't know. And maybe it's something that they learned back in like acting school where it's like if you want somebody to remember you, you say something weird and they'll keep that in the back of their head of why did they say it that way?
Yeah, maybe.
Also,
the one other on you go.
Well, I was going to say the one other big change here is that Lois is barely in the goddamn movie.
Oh no, she's basically got a cameo because we've got a new love interest. Well, technically we've got an old love interest in some ways because this is all about Clark rekindling with Lana. The fact that this Lana also happens to be his mum in a future version of Superman is quite funny now. I almost wanted to segue by saying also Clark tries to bang his mum because that's kind of in hindsight what this feels like now.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to say that Freud was right about a lot of things, but apparently there's one very specific thing for Superman.
To be fair, this is actually something that while like by the time she was cast as Martha Kent in Smallville, it was already starting to become this thing, or maybe Smallville was the thing that really got it going, was this idea of taking cast members who are associated with the property in past versions and giving them new, smaller roles. Well, in this case, it was a bigger role because she was like a main star in that, but like Terrence Stamp voices Jor-El in Smallville, for example, and he plays Zod, obviously Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder both pop in for a quick cameo here or there. Like, it became a recurring thing.
90% of the Arrowverse is literally just that. It's literally just how many people can we pull back from old properties. Yeah.
Because they did the same thing with Supergirl, with even the Flash brought back the 90s TV version of the Flash actor in something, and that's not like something that's fondly remembered by many people, but they still did it because hey, we've got this weird like DC sense of like heritage that we're going to keep playing on. So,
it's called Legacy, Pete.
Legacy. Which, to be fair, DC Comics themselves love to do with continuity all the time, so why not? It feels like it's on brand.
Oh, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Fair enough. So, yeah. I mean, the plot at least starts with Richard Pryor is Gus Garman, and he is unemployed and struggling to find employment and becomes a computer technician, I guess we'll call it. Programmer was the word.
Yeah.
Do you know why I said that?
Yeah,
It's
why
because
not?
he refers to dishwashing as a kitchen technician at the start of the movie. That's why the word technician was in my
Yeah.
head.
And that's fine. He becomes a computer programmer. However, I want to ask you something, Pete. The fact that he just learned programming in like the second scene of this movie, does that vibe with anything else that happens in this movie? Like at all?
I'm not sure where you're at. It follows the cartoon logic of much of the rest of the movie that he can learn to do it that quick. Well, it's not even that he learns. He's like gifted. He's like a savant when it comes to computers.
Yeah.
He just magically makes things happen. And even the computer teacher's like, well, but we're not getting into the actual. I just wanted to set up what the start of the plot was. So he's
Right,
doing that.
right.
And then the other side, Clark's going back to Smallville for his high school reunion, and he's convinced Perry to let him write a story on it. And that's the setup of the two sides of the movie. Boom.
Can I just say how bland and boring of a story that sounds to me? Like, if I were in Perry White's shoes and one of my ace reporters walked in and said, hey, I know that we want to talk about all this corruption going on and all this crime happening, all that stuff, but I'm going to my high school reunion and I'd like to take up a column for that. How the hell is he going to say yes to that?
I can only think Clark was out of vacation days because he could have just put in for like, the weekend off to go do it.
That's true.
But instead he's like, no, let me take Jimmy so you can take some photographs. But anyway, so I mean, as far as plot, I mean, as far as cast goes, we've talked about Richard Pryor, Christopher Reeve's obviously back as Superman, Lois Lane's there in a very tiny role this time. It's basically just a little bookend. Perry's back, Jimmy's back. Arguably, Jimmy doesn't get a lot to do, but he gets the most to do he's probably had in any of these movies.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, I think, more than it is because it's so front loaded. Like, in terms of percentage of the movie, by the time we get to the point where he basically bows out of the plot, like, he makes up a good, I don't know, 50% of it by that point. Like, he's in most of the beginning.
Yeah, which is much, much more than either of them. I mean, especially two. Like, he was barely into. So yeah, we have Lana Lang played by Nanette O'Toole, and then we have kind of the group of villains. The main one's Robert Vaughn playing Ross Webster. He's kind of our millionaire, mad, greedy genius. Is it not even a genius?
Capitalist, whatever.
And his sister's kind of the mean lady, and then he's got like a sort of blonde bimbo type kind of like character who the sister hates having around, but he obviously is quite flirty with her. And that's Lorelai. Yeah, because when they said her name, I thought of the video game Lorelai and the Laser Eyes. So that's how I'll remember that. But she's played by Pamela Stevenson, who I don't know from anything, right? But she's got that really high pitched voice she puts on and all the rest of it, and everyone stares at her because she's so sexy. Blah 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 blah. Weird thing is, when I was looking up the movie after or just before we started recording, right, and I had the page up, and for some reason I clicked on her to see if she'd been in anything else because her photo was quite funny. She's got like kind of like an 80s like metal hair type thing going on in her IMDb photo, and it mentioned in her like little bio at the top that when she started working on a show at the start of the 80s, she met Billy Connolly and had 3 kids. And I went, wait, she had 3 kids with Billy Connolly? And I went and looked up her wiki page, and yes, she's been married to Billy Connolly since the 80s and has 3 kids with him. Billy Connolly, if you don't know who that is a Scottish comedian who's kind of a national treasure. This was just a weird, I had no idea that this was Billy Connolly's wife that I was watching during this movie. So
yeah, that's strange. I mean, I didn't really know her at all either. I see on her thing, the thing that she was apparently known for was a show called Not the 9 O'Clock News.
That's what she
I'm not familiar with.
That's where she met Billy Connolly, apparently. So
right. Honest to God, out of the villains, she's kind of the standout to me. Like, the other two were fine, they're villainous or whatever, but she actually had some weird level of depth to her that I wasn't expecting from her character.
They pull a couple of things, a couple of simple little things that give her a weird bit of depth and kind of some empathy even, and you're like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But fair enough, yeah. And that's kind of it for the prominent characters. There's a lot of like guest characters who kind of pop in. I guess the only other one that's worth mentioning is kind of the drunk who's in Clark's class, Brad, who keeps trying to hit on Lana. He's kind of a running thing throughout the movie, so I'll mention him, but he's there too.
I will give full credit to the writers of this in that Lana makes sense. Lana, you go back to Smallville, of course, you got the small town girl Lana, at least from a modern comic sensibility. I don't know if it was the same back when this was written, but it makes sense that Lana would be reintroduced if you don't have access to Lois. I will give them full credit, though, that they managed to pull back Brad, who was in that intro scene as like the bully guy for Clark back in Superman 1. So full credit to taking the lore that they've already established in this series and actually doing something with it rather than just inventing new characters where needed.
Yeah. And he's still, you know, when we first see him in the movie, he's talking about his glory days in the football team. So, like, you know, he's the guy you think he is, and he's not changed.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. He's the kind of guy who goes to a high school reunion because, Jesus, screw that.
Whereas Clark's, like, just really enthusiastic because it sounds swell.
Yeah. He just wants to go back home. I mean, I think they make the point of saying that he hasn't been back to Smallville since, I think they'd say his mom died.
Yeah, that's what Anna says, yeah.
Yeah, where was that plot point? I feel like that would have been nice to see, but whatever.
It's between movies, I guess. It's happened.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
I guess.
Here we are.
Yeah. Only other thing that I want to mention is that we've been keeping track of where's Christopher Reeve in the credits, and he finally has top billing. He did manage to eke it out over Richard Pryor.
Yeah. Hackman's back in the next one, though, so I've got a funny feeling he might get bumped to second again.
That would be horrible for Christopher Reeve. I feel so bad for him.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. Yeah, it's a very flawed movie. I don't think there's any... But I will say it's a constantly interesting flawed movie. Like, it keeps doing things, so there's a lot to talk about, bizarrely. Like, as I was watching it kept, you know... And not surprising in the sense, because I grew up watching this, so nothing was surprising me actively, but, like, looking through the lens of, like, someone watching this for the first time at a reasonable age, there is, like, a lot of weird, surprising things that it keeps, like, throwing at you, and it keeps changing things up and shaking things up, and so it's like, because I mean, the opening scene, like, forgetting the you know, the slapstick kind of like just like set of comedy beats that you get over the titles, like the opening scene of this movie is someone looking for the unemployment check. Like, that's how the movie starts, and I can't help but wonder, anyone sitting down and going, why is this the first scene in Superman 3? What is going on? Like, we started the last one on Krypton with Zod, like, being set up because he's going to be the villain of the movie, and we start this one with Richard Pryor arguing that he's, you know, he deserves his unemployment check.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that sort of vein, it makes sense of they're setting up the villain the same way. Like, they're saying, okay, this is going to be our guy who's quote-unquote the villain. I think, obviously, over the course of the movie, we get different inclinations to that idea, but honestly, for me, what I think it probably was that it was them leading into the marketing. I'm 95% sure this movie was sold on Richard Pryor in the next Superman movie. And so they wanted to, as soon as audiences sat down, know, hey, you don't gotta wait. Look, he's here. Funny Man is here. This is what you came for, right?
Also, I do wonder, I was going to say it's surprising that he didn't get top billing, actually, but I do wonder if because 1 and 2 were kind of like a package deal for the studio with the cast and crew. I do wonder that if this, you know, this one is like, okay, we're bringing it back. Like, I don't know if like Reeve had like, you know, had to be re-upped to a new deal and maybe he had a bit more power and that's why he gets top billing, is because, oh, hey, like, I'm your star now, so give me my name at the top. Thank you very much.
Possible. I mean, that's the thing, is that this movie, they didn't bring back Gene Hackman, which, fair enough, he was not super critical to the last movie. He probably could have been written out. Easy enough to get a different Superman villain in here. Lois is a little bit harder to work around. They did have to include her, but basically just to show up and say, hi, I'm not going to be here for this movie. And then disappear.
I'm not convinced. You used to keep saying working around and saying we don't have Lois. I'm not convinced it was that way round. I actually think they wanted a new love interest, so they wrote Lois out of the movie. Not that they couldn't have access to her, so they had to write someone new. I think they just wanted something fresh. That's the impression I got anyway.
Fair. I'm going based off of the top trivia on IMDb, which basically says
ironclad source.
After Kidder expressed her disgust with the firing of Richard Donner to the producers, her role was cut down to 12 lines in less than 5 minutes. So
okay, well, that still is their choice, though, right? So, like, maybe not a creative choice, but that's still like the executive saying, "Hey, we don't want to use her, so write her as little as possible."
Yeah, I feel like it was just them preempting the difficulties of like, look, she's going to be a pain if we try to keep her on, so let's just get out of this as early as possible.
It's almost a surprise they brought her back at all. I mean, because they could have just like had someone say, "Oh, she's off in Bermuda," right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And just never see her.
The point I was getting to there is they kind of have to kowtow to Christopher Reeve because I don't think they could have gotten away with recasting him.
Oh, no.
I think he is kind of needed here.
He you know, I don't think you could make another Superman movie in this time period without having him back. So obviously once time passes and we're kind of like past that era, it's a different story. But I think at the time he was Superman, and I think changing him for the audience would have been a really tough, honestly, an impossible sell. Really. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, I guess we should probably touch on the music before we get into things. Obviously, there's still moments of the John Williams music, and those moments still work. It still hits hard. There's definitely a bit more like other stuff that's just not as good, kind of sprinkled like in, but it's you know. So if you think, imagine like a percentage slider, it's a little bit worse this time, but there's still a lot of good in there. But it's only because it's the good stuff that came before. So
right. Like, I'm not, if you told me, hey, this song came from Superman 3, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that. I wouldn't be able, even if you're playing it next to the movie, I'd be like, nah, I don't remember that at all. But then the John Williams score kicks in every once in a while, and I'm like, okay, all right, I know this one.
Yeah. It is worth mentioning, though, that it is, you know, re-recorded this time, for sure, because it does sound a little bit different. If you actually listen to it side by side with the other one, you can hear kind of like, oh, it sounds a little less full, it sounds a little bit cheaper sounding.
Yeah.
But obviously the composition is still really good, so it still sounds great for the most part.
Right. I think that is something I did note. Maybe it's just the version that's on Max. Maybe there's like a 4K edition somewhere, but I really noticed a severe decline in audio fidelity in this one. Like everyone's just lines sounded more scratchy than prior films did, which probably got some sort of a remaster to the version that I watched it, but it just sounded lower quality overall.
I mean, I did watch it in 4K. Why would it be 4K on Max? That's Warner Brothers service. Why wouldn't they have
no idea.
the latest version of it?
Beats me. It just didn't sound like it was as good of quality. Maybe I'm just making that up for my own thing, but it didn't sound right to me compared to the other two.
I don't have anything notable to say about the sound, really. I will say that the image quality of the 4K is very good, arguably even better than the first two, and I think part of it is because there's a sort of intentional kind of dreamlike haziness to a lot of the first two movies. Like Donner sort of made a stylistic choice, and I respect that choice, but it doesn't necessarily make for a sharp 4K image at the end of the day, whereas this one, because it's shot a bit more traditionally, so therefore arguably weaker in terms of artistic merit, does actually show up looking a lot sharper when you remaster it in 4K. So, you know.
Now, there are a few sequences that are composited and very clearly composited, even with my not so 4K version.
Sure.
Was that worse in the 4K version? Do you think that was more apparent?
Oh, that's tough. Because I feel like I noticed that anyway, so I don't know if it's worse per se. I feel like the jump from 1080p to 4K doesn't really change that much. I think SD to HD, that's where that change happens, where stuff looks kind of noticeable now that it wasn't before. I think 1080p is still really good to the point where it's not night and day like that. There's obviously improvements. I like a lot of the improvements that come with the 4K. HDR more than anything, to be honest. But I wouldn't say that changed much. And I mean, obviously, there's a couple of dodgy. The flying's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes the composite is good, sometimes the composite is bad. I will say though, anything with the Tower of Pisa in the background was like horrendously composited.
Yeah, that's kind of the scene I was thinking of when I was asking the question. I'm like, can you just tell that that's two guys on a blue screen? Because I can.
I was watching so like a visual effects video on YouTube, and it was talking about like some things. It was actually a really interesting section on the Mission Impossible movies and how even some shots of the Burj Khalifa stuff is actually blue screened, and like, you know, there's a lot of real shots too, but there's actually also a blue screen part as well, and it's actually really impressive how it's seamless and no one ever notices, and everyone just thinks all the shots are real, and oh yeah, great, you know, round of applause. But there, there was one moment where he was sort of criticizing a lot of like filmmakers. It's a series called No CG's Actually Invisible CG. I think that's the name of the series that he does on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
He has a new one out anyway, but he did a bit where he sort of cut up a bunch of different directors from recent movies saying, oh, we did this as practically as possible, we did this with no CG. And there was one quote. Now, to be fair, most of this was kind of reasonable enough, right? It's a bit weird hearing it over and over again, but yeah, that can still be true, even if there's a lot of CG in the background, if they've got a lot of practical stuff as well. But the bit that caught me is that I can't remember for the life of me what director or slash movie it was, but someone said there wasn't a single green screen on the set of this film, and the video host cut to a shot of the set, and technically he's telling the truth because it's all blue screen.
Yeah, that's how you get around that.
That's really funny to me because he's just making an implication, but all he's saying is that no, green was bad for compositing reasons because of something else on set, so we had to use blue.
Yeah, that's someone getting in front of a lawyer or a judge or something and saying, I have not committed a single crime. Meanwhile, they're on trial for like 7 different things. It's like, yeah, not a single one. Wink.
Also, they had to use red screen on Predator, which is very rare because the colors of the jungle just made blue and green both not work. So they had to use red, which is rare. You don't use that often because people's skin is a bit too close to red to make that work. So
yeah.
But, hey, anyway, there you go. That's just a little bit of a side thing. Spoilers! Let's do spoilers for Superman 3. It's time, everyone.
No, I want to keep tangenting. Let's just not finish this review and keep tangenting on to other things.
No. We have to talk about Superman 3. It's important.
All right.
So, yeah, I mean, as far as like, we kind of, the opening comedy bit, I do kind of like the visual at one point where somehow a guy in a car has hit a fire hydrant and the water's filling up the car. So despite the fact that he's in the middle of a metropolis, right, a metropolitan street, somehow he's drowning in the middle of his car and he can't get out because the car's filling with water. I do think that's a really absurd, interesting visual, regardless of the context and just everything else going on. I don't hate that visual.
No, I think it's a fine enough thing. And honestly, in concept, I like the scene overall. If you have to do a comedy bit, this sort of Rube Goldberg of like one small thing, I think it's a pretty woman walking by a man and then he walks to a pole, just kicks off this chain of events of all of this slapstick crazy stuff that happens across the city that ends with Superman needing to get involved. I like that as a concept. What I didn't like was how absolutely insane and disconnected all of those pieces of the Rube Goldberg felt. So it felt like we did like 4 sketches and then we stopped that chain entirely and just picked up on some other different comedy beat entirely.
Yeah, I mean, there's like interesting little bits, and like, you get the visual that the 3 phone booths all knocking over like dominoes. That's part of it. The stuff that's really weird to me though is like there's like these little bombs, like cartoon style bombs that are just there next to like a roadworks, and I'm like, what are these for?
I think they're supposed to be like little kerosene lamps or stuff, but they are like black and spherical with a flame coming out of the top. So I get where you're coming from of thinking that they're bombs. But the only reason I don't think they're bombs is they didn't explode.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We never got a end on that.
Yes. And some say they're still sitting there waiting to blow up to this day.
Yes. No. Superman threw him into the sun in the next movie. They went up with.
There's a blind man whose like dog ends up getting like separated from, so he thinks he's got his dog's like leash again, but it's actually the paint like thing for the road, for the road lines, and it's like okay, and then he steps over the guy who's fallen in the hole, and then everything else starts again when this other guy gets paint dripping on him, and he for some reason thinks it's rain, even though it's clearly just paint all down his suit. He puts up an umbrella, and then a bucket, the paint bucket falls on his head, and for some reason he doesn't just lift the bucket off of his head. He starts trying to walk around with the bucket on his head, which leads to him falling into like an outside restaurant, and then that leads to a chain effect of whatever else.
It leads into, as every city must have during these sequences, a mime. A mime who trips on some gumballs and lands on his ass. Because every slapstick comedy sequence needs a mime.
I'll give it another positive though. So I like the car filling up with water, as contrived as it kind of is. I do like the visual. I also like Superman getting into the photo booth to change. I actually think that's an inspired choice. I think that's a funny bit where he comes out, he's dressed as Superman, he does it behind the curtain, but then the strip of photos comes out and he looks at them and it's like Clark, then half Superman, then almost Superman, and then Superman, and he rips off the bottom one and gives it to the kid that's standing there. I actually think that's an inspired little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I as much as it is still a comedy beat, because you have this guy who's drowning not 20 feet away,
yes,
and Superman takes the time to make sure, like, oh, just have to tear this real quick, hand it off to the kid, say thank you, son. And it's still a good moment. It's a nice little thoughtful thing of, okay, how do we get him to change his costume in a nice way here?
I think the weirdest thing about this whole set piece, though, set piece is maybe a word that I don't want to use, but like just for lack of a better one, is that it doesn't end with the Superman saving someone. Like it just sort of ends on like one of the more dud comedy bits. Someone just kind of, I don't even know what the final bit is, but it's not Superman. It kept going for another minute or two. Or maybe that, I think it was not 2 minutes, but like another 30 seconds or whatever.
Was it Jimmy? I think Jimmy was there and he was just eating his hot dog. Like that's the bit that it really ended on.
Yeah. Really, just some strange choices, and that leads straight into the next strange choice, which is, we're starting the Richard Pryor character story, which goes so long before it intersects with anything to do with Superman. That's the weird thing about even just the villains. Like, it takes a while before he interacts with the main villains, and then once the main villains start doing their shady things, it's not until they've done something like halfway through the movie where it finally, like, in some way intersects with Superman. Because this is the one big difference between this guy and Lex, like the rich guy, Robert Vaughn's character, is that Superman's not even on his mind the entire movie. It's not until he actually intervenes in something he was trying to do where he starts to have a problem with Superman. Whereas Lex is completely different. Lex is like, oh, I hate that he exists, like the ego can't let it be. Like, he's better than me. I can't have that. He's more powerful. Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, no. They literally go through their entire first stunt until Richard Pryor says, oh, by the way, Superman got involved and the whole stunt didn't work. And he's like, oh, crap, that's right. Superman's a thing. Well, I guess I got to deal with him. It's like, you forgot Superman's a thing? Okay, never mind.
Yep. So Richard Pryor, he's trying to get his unemployment check. He's at the dole office. I don't know if Americans call it that, but that's just one of the words we have for here. And I love how scared he is to cross the line, even though he's the one currently being seen by the woman at the counter.
Yep.
But he still feels scared to walk to it. And I guess that's just one of the little comedy bits that he... Like, I wonder if that was even scripted or if that's just Richard Pryor kind of... like riffing on like what's around him kind of thing.
Maybe it wasn't scripted initially, but there were several shots that were specifically shot to show him not stepping over, so they would at least have to know that was happening.
Yeah, I mean his body language though is definitely all him. Like the way he kind of nervously backs off and things like that.
Also, one of his character traits that we get established here is he has a yo-yo. He really likes using his yo-yo.
Yep.
It comes in later. That's the only... You know what? That's the weirdest bit. If you really follow this, like I said, it's A to B and B to C, but there's no carryover between, like, the A to C. The yo-yo is the one thing that they set up here, they reestablish somewhere in the middle, and then they pay off at the very end. Mm-hmm. That is, like, the only thing that carries the whole way through the movie.
What you're saying is that it's Chekhov's yo-yo.
Yes. Chekhov's yo-yo. Meaning that you... undo it once and it comes right back up to you, and you got to do that 6 times because it's in 2 different positions.
Yeah, sure. I don't know what you really just said to me, but well, that's fine. We'll move on.
I was kind of conflating Chekhov's guns and rule of threes into one big thing.
I see. Okay. All right. That's fine. We can't all be Richard Pryor. It's okay. So
yeah, that's fine.
Right. So he asked for a match from some guy on his way out, and he's very upset, of course, that he's now uneligible to get unemployment because he's been unemployed for 37 weeks or whatever it is. And there's an advert on the Matchbox for computer programming school, right? Hey, you want to make big bucks, become a computer programmer. And to be fair, timeline-wise, I get that this is kind of like a growing industry in the early 80s, like things are changing. And so... And obviously, we cut to other plots for a bit. I'm just going to stick with Richard Pryor for now. Because we see him at the computer school, and this guy... And there's the only thing we really get before it gets to Pryor is some woman who's in the class asks, hey, how do we do these 2 things at the same time? And the guy's like, oh, it's not possible. It can't be done. Computers are very advanced, but they can't do that. Which is a funny line as well, just like hearing that in 2025. Computers are advanced in 1983.
It wasn't even something along the lines of like, oh, how can we like send an image to people or something like that? Like something that would have been very difficult at the time. It's like, how do we save two numbers at the same time? Is pretty much the only thing she's asking. And he's like, that's insanity. What are you even asking about here?
Yeah, and then Richard Pryor puts up his hand and says, did it? And he's like, son of a bitch, how did you do that? And he's like, I don't know. I did it. And I'm like, oh, so he's just like one with the computer code. He can just like communicate with computers.
I love when I don't even know what he was doing, but he like flashed up the computer code to show his boss and like it all scrolled on screen. And the only thing I noticed it was like one thing of go to and then 36 lines of print, which means it was doing nothing. It was just literally printing out the lines for the screen.
Yeah. But I mean, audiences in 1983, the vast majority were never going to notice that.
Of course not. Of course. If you could even read it on the standard definition.
True. Well, no, but I mean, it was played in theaters in 35mm, so it would have been much better than SD. You forget, there's a reason why movies look so good in 4K is because they were shot in really high quality to begin with.
Right. Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
I don't. It's the same sort of thing where like you think about how like the life was and all that during like the 40s, 30s sort of stuff, and you think back to the cinema and you're like, oh, it was black and white. Yeah, that's where we were at.
Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of variance depending on how good the print was when you went to see something back in the day, but you know, but generally speaking, even a bad print in the movie theater back then would have been much better than, you know, SD at home. I'm sure.
But you would have had to pay a whole $1.50 to go in and see what the code actually said again, however much tickets were back then.
Yeah, and popcorn would have been like 50 cents or something like that.
Oh my god, they're fleecing us. Yeah, no, there was a point in here where it's actually one of the next scenes is he gets a job at a computer company and he gets his first paycheck and he says like, hey, wait a minute, hold on, I'm supposed to be making $200 a week. I'm like, that sounds really low, but I'm sure it's actually massive for inflationary purposes.
Yeah, I mean, that's $800 a month. I'm sure in 1983 money, that's, you know, not terrible.
Yeah, hold on. Hold on. Inflation. Go ahead. I'll get this there. 1983.
Can a computer figure this out at the same time as you talking to a microphone?
Not at all. It's physically impossible. There's no possible way that anybody could ever. Okay, never mind. Here it is. It is worth $647 nowadays.
What, 200? So
200.
So that'd be like 2,400 a month. That doesn't seem terrible for
that's pretty entry level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. That sounds right.
Good on him.
Can't fault it. So obviously he's very upset though about taxis and various things cutting it down to about 160, and he's like, oh, this is, how can I live on this? And like one of the guys says, oh, a lot of that goes into your savings for retirement and stuff like that. It's like, I want the money now while I'm young and I can enjoy it. And I'm like, all right, Richard, sure. But
absolutely.
Yeah, but he's talking to him on the way to lunch, and this guy just happens to mention, oh, it's really $162.50. And he's like, what do you mean? What do you mean a half cent? He's like, well, technically they always round down, these big companies. And if this sounds familiar, this idea that there's all these rounding things, it's because this is actually reused. And if I remember correctly, they reference this movie when they bring it up in that other movie. But it's in what's it called? Office thingamajig.
Come on, you know it.
Office.
Take a guess.
Stapler. You have my stapler. That one. Office. I can't remember. What's the Office?
Office Space.
Office Space. God damn it. Right.
Yes.
But yes, they try and pull this trick in Office Space. What trick, you ask, dear audience? Well, Richard Pryor, because he's so good with computers now, and because this guy specifically says, well, no one knows what these little half cents are. The company would never notice if it's gone, which is a lie because they do notice it later on. But basically, the computer knows what all those half cents are. So he just decides to stay late one night and can hack in. Well, I say hack. He types in.
I was going to say, hack is a very strong word for, okay, security measures active. Enter into keyboard. Disable security measures, and that's it. That's all it takes.
Like, it was a bold new age. People didn't realize they needed all sorts of security in their computers. He
I
basically
wanted him to sit there and say, "It's a Unix system. I know this."
he asks the computer to basically just give him all of the leftover half cents that everyone's lost after their paychecks for however long. And next time he gets paid, the guy's coming around with the envelopes. He pulls out his paycheck. He's like, "Here you go." And he's like, "Hey, is there another one for me? I put in a request for some expenses." And he's like, "Oh, there is another one." And he pulls it out, and it's a check for something around $85,000. And I have to say, Richard Pryor's reaction, where he does like a wave to everyone, where he's trying to act normal, is actually really funny.
Oh yeah. No, I don't want to give away any sort of like MVP stuff, because I do think it is actually a bit of a toss up, but all of his interactions with other people are just good. Like, there's no point in here where I think that he is the one that's pulling down on the interaction. He's always at least matching or improving the interaction because of the way his body language, the way he talks, the way he makes these jokes. It just is always better because of him.
Yeah, a legitimately good reaction. And of course, it's after this where it's at some point we do cut finally to Robert Vaughn's character in his super expensive but very 80s office, which is nothing but grey and black, kind of like, style. There's lots of lights. There's a big hidden bar behind the bookcase, and like, the big fountain in the middle, which later on it turns out can spin around into a big map for all the shipping vessels. More on that later. Anyway, he's got all this stuff, and he's talking to his sister about the fact that someone, right, and there's a guy there as well telling him this news, that someone has fleeced the company out of 85 grand, and he's upset about it. He's furious. And the old guy's like, "Oh, I mean, well, back in the day, you'd have payroll, everything would be like hard copy, we'd all have to do it by hand. So the only way you could rob from was just to come in with a gun and demand some money. But now it's all those blasted computers." And Robert Vaughn, like, his eyes start to like, think about this, and he's like, "Yeah, whoever did this is probably quite a genius or something, isn't he?" And he says this to his sister that, can we ever find who this is? And like the two of them kind of say, no, probably not. Like, they'll just lie low. Like, that would be the smart thing to do. And he's like, "Yeah, unless he's a complete idiot." And then he looks out the window, and Richard Pryor pulls around the corner in a brand new convertible.
Yeah, they literally just do a Gilligan cut where it's just someone this smart is never going to be found. I mean, he has to be an absolute genius. Only an idiot would be able to come out with that much money. And then you hear the tires squeal.
Yeah.
And it's just him drawing all the attention to himself. It's a good comedy bit.
Yeah, the weird thing is that forgetting that this is meant to be a Superman movie, like, I've not got much complaints about anything in this plot line other than the fact that it's in a Superman movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my complaints kind of pick up once we get into the third act. I think that's kind of where I'm at, and like, okay, this plot kind of got out of hand, but up until then, I'm down with it because Richard Pryor's funny, and I think that they make a good case of why this guy is believably villainous throughout the whole thing. It doesn't feel like he is just shooting for the moon, being mustache twirling villain. He's just a greedy guy, and they establish why he's doing what he's doing very well.
I mean, Pryor's character, I'd argue, is not even villainous per se. He's more just...
No.
He's kind of out for himself, but he's not mean-spirited. He's not trying to, like, take anyone else down a peg. Like, he's just trying to, like, he's a little greedy. He's trying to look out for himself. But, obviously that helps the arc because he grows a bit of a heart and, a conscience at the end and so on and so on.
Yeah, there's an implication that they don't really tap on, which is that when the villain does see Richard Pryor, calls him up, that it's essentially go with my villainous plan, be my tech guy, or else I'm turning you into the police because you stole from my company. But I mean, it's I don't know, it's tapped on, but it's not really that heavily tapped on. And Richard Pryor seems pretty interested in seeing if he can do this stuff anyway. So,
I don't know if I agree with that.
I agree. Yeah,
because I think his reactions to a lot of the things that have been said to him are very kind of like, wait, what? We're going to do that? Like us? Like he always seems to have this kind of like sense of, wait, what am I been roped into here? But I feel like I can't say no. There's always kind of that sense to how he's performing the scenes to me, at least most of the time.
The wait a minute, that's illegal.
Yes. Your point.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't think by the end of the movie he is supposed to be villainous. I think even Superman makes that clear himself that
Yeah.
this is supposed to be a guy who's just like, yeah, he made some bad choices, but he's not a bad guy. But yeah, it's weird because it feels like this beginning part of the movie is riding a weird line with him where he is doing the villain's bidding and he's not putting up enough of a fight where it feels like he's trying to be good either. So he is in this weird gray area.
Yeah, he's malleable, I guess. So I mean that kind of builds us up to what Robert Vaughn's plan is, which is he controls all the trade in the world of coffee beans, except one. I actually kind of like his performance, Robert Vaughn here. The way he kind of gets really annoyed and says, "Oh, there's just one little sniveling country who refuses to play by the rules, to trade with me." And Richard Pryor's like, "What country?" He's like, "Colombia."
I love how immediately following that he explains, like, yep, Colombia has 2 exports and one of them's coffee, but they don't mention what the other export is. And I'm like, wonder what that could be.
So it's like, yeah, we want to, like, mess them up. And this is where we just get into absolute cartoon nonsense of what computers can do. Or in this case, what a satellite can do. Because, hey, have you heard of Vulcan? And I am shocked that no one made a Star Trek joke. I am absolutely gobsmacked that no one said that's where Spock comes from. No. So, fair enough.
I guess you wouldn't need to own the rights to be able to make that joke, right?
No, you wouldn't.
It's pop culture. You can just say it.
In fact, the reason why the satellite's called Vulcan, I'm willing to bet, is because the nerds at NASA named it after Vulcan from Star Trek.
Oh, entirely possible. There is a, I think it's a Roman god by the name of Vulcan. So, it is possible that it was that, but yeah, it's definitely nerds.
I've definitely heard of NASA naming other things after sci-fi stuff, so I don't. I'm pretty confident.
Don't we have an Enterprise? Didn't we get to the Enterprise already?
I don't know. I don't pay that much attention. Anyway, so this is the plan, and to do this, they want them to use like a computer that connects to their mainframe because it's powerful enough, but it'll look like suspicious on them if it's from their headquarters here. So, we have to find some dinky like little subsidiary company that I own that you can break into, right? And no one will know who you are, so it won't be tied back to us, but it's somewhere, and he goes, somewhere small. Cut to Richard Pryor arriving in Smallville and going to, I don't even know what the company, what this building does. I'm sure it's said on the front sign, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, whatever. It's just a tiny little subsidiary.
Yeah, and the drunk bully character Brad is a security guard here who just lets him in because Richard Pryor apparently has done his research on this guy and knows that he's an alcoholic, because he just opens his case and it's nothing but booze. And Brad, the guy that he is, just lets him on in.
He goes through a whole bit that I was in Brad's shoes during, where he just kind of does a fast talking routine where he's like, "Oh yeah, big boss needs this done by first thing in the morning. I got to get up there. I got to take care of it right now, or else we're both going to be nailed to the wall." And Brad's like, "What? What are you talking about?" And finally, he just opens up the case and sees all the booze, and he's like, "Oh, okay, come on in. Let's go upstairs. I can lock the doors for a while."
He also does like a voice as well. He does like a sort of like I'm a businessman voice or whatever it is. I don't even know what you call it, but he puts on a voice as he's doing all this. And then
it's the best way I could describe it is a Better Call Saul suit, like very loud, very poppy sort of business blazer.
Which they set up actually because he walks past the window with the suit in the store window and he decides to grab it. Also, when he does arrive, he does bump into Clark briefly, or more precisely, Clark bumps into him with the car door. And again, the body language, the comedy of Richard Pryor selling like how hard this door hit him as he's sort of like, hunched over, like trying to like walk in baby steps up the street. Again, does it belong in a Superman movie? Not really, but he is funny. Yeah. So
yeah, it's a funny moment. I'm fine with it.
What did you think of his big hat?
The same thing I thought about most of the other scenes in this, which is why, but okay, I guess. Like, it just seemed like basically the way I got to it was Richard Pryor was probably deferred to, and any time that he said, I think this would be funny, they did it. And I got the vibe that he said, okay, so we're drinking or whatever, get me like a ridiculously oversized cowboy hat, and they were like, done, and they just brought it to him, and no one questioned it, no one said why, and Richard Pryor just rolled with it because I guess it works, I guess it's there, but it's complete non sequitur.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, ultimately, he's just trying to drink Brad under the table so that he can go and do the stuff he wants to do with the computers. And he has to, like, really liquor up Brad because Brad's built up a bit of a tolerance over the years. But eventually, he does go down, and Richard Pryor's like, you thought I was drunk, but I was just playing. But he's stumbling as he says this, and he's, like, barely keeping himself up straight and trying to get to the computer room. And I do, shout out to former co-host of the Ace, Tara, because she loved a scene in any movie where you have to turn two keys at the same time. And that's effectively what happens here, is that to get this computer to even turn on, seemingly, you have to insert these two sort of like encrypted digital key things in either side, so you need two people, which leads to Richard Pryor bringing in the unconscious Brad, tying a string around his wrist so that he can sort of pull his arm as he puts his key in at the same time.
So this was the point where, at least for me, this is maybe you felt differently here. This is the point for me where I felt like the opening sequence where he's just this unemployable bum who like can't hold a job at all doesn't make any sense because he's clearly very intelligent in being able to problem solve. Like it's where it kind of felt like his intro is now just like, all right, why did we do that if we were going to make him smart anyway?
To play devil's advocate, I think what they're going for is that he's kind of like that, Joe, that thing in school where the teacher would say, if you worked even half as hard at doing the work than trying to avoid doing work, you'd be really good at it. I think that's what they're going for, is that he's a genius, but he spends most of his genius powers in trying to avoid just being employed, and he comes up with excuses and so on and so on. I think that's what they're going for. But admittedly, it would actually be more believable if you just started the movie with, oh, he's really good at computers, go from there.
Right, exactly. That's the part where I'm like, why does he have to be this savant that didn't know he had the ability rather than just being good with computers to start out with?
Yeah, it's also a really weird thing to say someone's a savant with, is like being able to code computers, because it is something you kind of have to learn, and like maybe you could pick it up a bit quicker than other people, but it's not like chess where your mind just sees it and like understands it at a level that someone else doesn't. Right? It's not quite the same thing. But
I mean, maybe he could understand like data structures better than other people. Maybe he could understand like the underlying hardware better than other people. But I'm not going to say that he's all of a sudden just out of the box knowing how to code BASIC better than other people. That seems a bit impossible.
So funny thing is, once he gets into the computer and he's sitting there drunk, he needs to find like the controls for the satellite to do the thing they want to do, which is basically, give a lot of bad weather to Colombia, because this weather satellite you can invert it so that it'll cause bad weather instead of detecting it or some shit. Just nonsense.
Yeah, that's how that works.
Nonsense cartoon stuff. Honestly, this is almost on the level of turning the time backwards by spinning the earth backwards. It's that level of logic. It absolutely is.
Absolutely. Especially with the level of, I mean, you get to see, okay, he's looking for this program. What is it able to control besides the weather satellite? And it turns out literally everything.
Yeah, that's what we're getting to here, is that he has to find that program. It's not like easily searchable, I guess. So he's basically going through another bunch of systems to get to it. So we get this weird montage of effects that he is having like in the country, presumably, right? Some of which are set the next morning, so I can only assume it's showing you the after effect of what he's done as opposed to like what's happening right now. Yeah, because it doesn't make much sense. Because one of them's like the couple get a letter in the morning, and I'm like, well, that's not happened yet. I mean, I know there's different time zones in the US, but I'm pretty sure that it's not that much of a difference.
I mean, even a letter in the morning, if it's a full invoice, that's got to still be mailed. That's probably like 2 weeks after the fact.
True, that's a very good point. And that would also mean Smallville would, at the very least, if you were saying it's dark here but morning somewhere else, you'd have to be saying Smallville's on the West Coast at that point, which I'm pretty sure it's not meant to be because it's in Kansas. So,
Nah.
Anyway. So we get a variety of things here. We get an ATM machine that just keeps spitting out money, and this guy is having the night of his life just taking all this money and shoving it down his trousers. To the point where there's even like a weird little bit here where it makes him look like a pervert because he's got his hand down his trousers as a woman walks past, and he just kind of has to try and play it off. And I'm like, weird joke for your Superman movie, but all right.
So I've been saying that for the past 45 minutes. Weird joke for your Superman movie, but all right.
Okay, true. Technically, they're all weird because it shouldn't be this much of a comedy anyway. But I'm saying that if you're going to have comedy in a Superman story, doing pervy jokes feels like especially weird. So anyway, there's that. There's the traffic lights like going off and on, and then eventually the little green man's like escapes into the red man's like window, and they start fighting. Explain to me, David, how a computer malfunction causes the little green and red men in the traffic lights to become sentient and want to fight.
All right. Have you ever seen Tron?
Unfortunately.
That's the explanation. All programs are actually sentient and wanting to do the bidding of their programmers.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm just saying, in a movie with lots of silly stuff like the satellite inversing and all that, this sticks out as being maybe the silliest. Maybe. Like, I'm not going to plant my flag, but there's an argument, I think. Just because...
Yeah, I'd agree.
Because this is the sort of thing where, okay, all this other stuff is at least big and stuff we don't interact with all the time, but we see traffic lights all the time in regular life. Everyone's familiar with what a traffic light is. This is stupid. There's no fundamental way of saying that it isn't.
Okay. There's a difference, I think, between stupid and I don't even know how to say it besides saying like comedically stupid. Like there's dumb and it's not landing, and then there's dumb and it is landing. And I hesitate to say that this isn't landing. I think it is still a funny bit. But it's definitely the most out there thing they do.
I mean, I've said this like 10 times now, but definitely does not belong in a Superman movie.
Yeah.
I will.
Oh, no doubt.
I will add on. And then there's the guy who gets a bill for like $100,000 or whatever it is, and then just shoves some fruit in his wife's face. That's the bit because
the wife seems oddly okay with it. Like she seems like she's like, I don't think this is actually on Richard Pryor at all. I think she was expecting this to be a big bill, and this is how she normally has to deal with it.
I mean, look, if this is him channeling his anger, and instead of being abusive in the traditional sense, he just smooshes a bit of fruit into the nose every so often when times get tough, I suppose that's a bit better.
Yeah, all I can think back to is, I think it was Superman 1 with the, Mommy, there was a man outside who was flying. What did I tell you about lying? Smack.
Oh, dear. Yeah, there was another couple of things here as well. There's no way I'm going to remember them all, but it was just a cascade of nonsense. And then he finds the satellite and does this. Now, this is probably a good place to jump back and go down the Superman side, because it's after this point where the two plots start to intermingle a bit more. So this is kind of a neat halfway kind of point to stop at. Especially since we have to set up the couple that are in Colombia when this bad weather hits, because that's important to the plot.
Is it?
No, it's definitely not. This is just a comedy bit. They just wanted an extra comedy element to what the villains are doing. So Superman is going to go to Smallville, but before he leaves, Lois is there. They say hello, blah, blah, blah. Lois is actually getting a vacation. She's going to Bermuda. She whips out her bikini and waves it in Clark's face and says, "I'm off, bye-bye." Mainly the joke in this scene is a combination of two things. One, that Clark keeps trying to say goodbye and like Perry just refuses to like verbally acknowledge it. He like nods at him at one point, but that's about it. And also there's a woman here who's demanding that Perry draw the winning bingo ball for like a work competition for a couple of people to get to go on this vacation to Colombia. And it's like, okay. Random. No. All right.
The bit with Superman is, or with Clark and Perry, is when Clark is going to leave, he's like, well, it's going to be tough having one of my ace reporters leave, Lois. And then Clark's like, wait, hold on, what? And, you know, he's trying to get that same sort of verbal recognition from Perry as he's leaving. And Perry's just like, yeah, all right, bye, Kent. Go on, get out of here. So I appreciate that, at least as a mild comedy bit. The bingo thing, sure, yeah, whatever. It's literally just there to set up that this random guy and his wife in the company that we've never met before get an all expenses paid trip to Colombia, which just so happens to overlap with the evil villain scheme.
That's it. That's pretty much it. So Clark and Jimmy are on a bus to Smallville, and they get interrupted because along the way near Smallville there is a chemical plant which is on fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part I enjoy this sequence. Just as a typical Superman scene. People are in danger. There's fires to put out. He's going to, you know, do his thing. Yeah, that's fine. Obviously there's like an extra element of danger here because like, hey, all this stuff that's in there is like dangerous. Like everything's flammable at the very least, if not explosive, if not. As we find out, there's like a chamber filled with experimental acid, which if it gets hot, will form a cloud which will eat through everything that touches, and it'll be like this will be like Chernobyl going off and like causing fallout in like the entire like coast of America.
I love the way the scientist does this, because Superman busts in and he tells the scientist, hey, we got to get out of here. And the scientist, no, I got to keep an eye on this stuff. And he says, oh, what is it? And he's like, oh, it's harmless. It's just an entire room full of acid. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very harmless, buddy. I don't care about what level of heat it needs to get to before it goes critical. A room full of acid still sounds very, very bad.
What he should have said.
And then he explains about heat.
What you should have said
go for it.
Is, it's room temperature acid.
You better hope it doesn't become boiling acid.
Right. Also, actually, what did you think of Superman's transition here from Clark to Superman?
Oh, how did he do it here?
He goes into the back of a cop car and comes out the other side as Superman.
Right. I'm all right with it. I think that the moment itself is fine. To make it a comedy beat, they show the cop afterwards who just kind of like looks behind him, tries to figure out what just happened, and then shakes his head, shakes it off. I'm okay with it. It's not as good as the photo booth scene. If anything, I mean, I think there's only there's two other transitions of how he gets changed in the movie. I'd say it's in like third place out of those four.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Honestly, the cop like reaction afterwards where he thinks he saw something, I think it's the worst part of it, just because I'm like, oh, I thought the car was empty, and I thought it was just a fun, like, oh, like, hide in the car, change, come out. But obviously Superman, so it's super quick. But, I don't know. Anyway, so the big thing here is that the water runs out for the firefighters, and Superman is like, oh, crap, like, where's the nearest lake? And they're like, oh, it's like, you know, that direction. It's like 8 miles away. So Superman flies off, freeze breaths the lake, at least a layer of the lake anyway, because there's still water there when he picks this up, but he picks up this giant sheet of ice and flies it over the top of the chemical plant, drops it, and it disperses into rain by the time it goes through the clouds and rains down onto the plant.
I know it's probably just a sheet of ice, but visually it looked like that thing was at least like 5-6 feet like thick. Like it seemed like it was a pretty thick layer of ice, all things considered. So all I could think when he went to drop it is, okay, that's not going to melt by the time that it hits there, and you're just going to cause intense property damage and like the cave-in of every roof on that building.
Yeah, I think they don't do this in the movie, but I think you can headcanon it as he also hits it with heat vision on its way down, just to
sure
speed up the process. I mean,
look, if I'm going to headcanon anything in this movie, it's going to be that the movie didn't exist. Like, I'm just going to stick with 2.
Oh no, I think it's such an interesting oddity. I like it existing, for better or worse.
Gotcha. The other thing we kind of skipped over is Jimmy Olsen is just the most involved person to ever get a photograph ever, because he decides that to get a good vantage point of this chemical fire, He climbs up a fireman's ladder, like one of the truck ladders, to get a good point of view. And as they're telling him, hey kid, get the hell off the truck, he says, just a picture or two, hold on. And then after an explosion or whatever, he gets in a mess, breaks his leg, and almost catches on fire before Superman saves him.
Yeah, and then we find out later, because he's back at the Daily Planet taking a photo of the contest winners, and he's got a big cast on his leg, and Perry mentions that he didn't even come back with photos because all of his film melted in the incident. Yep. So it was all for nothing.
Yep. I mean, I can understand him getting too close to things, but like, you know, the last movie we had Lois underneath the elevator, and she just kind of like, yeah, she shouldn't have been that close to the people with the bomb to begin with, but she did kind of get stuck under that elevator trying to hide from the terrorists. This one, what was he hoping to accomplish by getting on top of a fireman's ladder? Like, at best, he's delaying them from putting out the fire.
Yes. Yes, he's obstructing their process, potentially.
Yeah. So, yeah. Bad Jimmy, no points.
Yeah. Also, at one point, Superman like grabs like a big metal like cylinder that's on the roof and uses it as a chute for the people that are trapped up top.
That sent like a shiver down my spine, not in a good way, because all I could think is there's no way that the internal of that pipe was actually like completely silky smooth.
Oh, sure.
It probably had like rivets and stuff sticking out, and all I could imagine is someone sliding down that, getting caught, and just I don't like it.
Everyone that comes out the bottom, there's just one guy with a big like lash in the back of his ass cheek. Just
right, exactly. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. Stop.
Anyway, he gets into Smallville. He's at the reunion. Lana's there. They have a whole quiet moment looking at each other. Actually, the thing that got me the most was at the very end of the scene. When they're dancing together, because Brad tries to ask her to dance. She's like, oh, Clark already asked me, and just grabs Clark. It's a nice moment, whatever. But they're dancing, and Earth Angel starts playing, and I went,
yeah.
Was this just like a really popular like thing to play at high schools in the 80s? Because I know this from one other movie at a high school dance, and it's Back to the Future, which came later than this as well. It might be worth mentioning.
My only other assumption is maybe somewhere around 1982 or so, it hit the public domain or something. And like, they were just able to do this song as a old-timey hit.
Maybe. I might think that's a problem for a Warner Brothers release movie, admittedly, but...
No. Probably not. I mean, maybe they just own the track and they're just like, yeah, sure, go ahead, put that on. We promise we won't use it again for another 2 years minimum. Wink.
I mean, Warner Bros. Didn't make Back to the Future, so that's that idea shot.
Oh yeah, it's Universal.
Universal, yeah. So anyway, at a dance, rekindles with Lana. There's a bit of light physical comedy here where she sort of like mixes up what she's holding in her hand, and she almost like pours like coleslaw or something onto like a record.
Yeah. I just want to get off my one critique of Lana right here. I think that she is good as a love interest for Clark. I don't think she has enough to be her own character. I don't think she really does enough to really have this definition of who she is as a person to make me care about her separate from her relationship with Clark.
Oh, yeah, I guess I agree. I don't know if that... I don't know if it ever matters in the movie, though, I guess.
No, it doesn't. But like, obviously it's the love interest. I'm comparing her immediately to Lois. And I think Lois does have that. Lois is her own character. Lana does not get that same treatment here. No,
that's fair. Well, maybe you could critique that and say, like, is it a little bit backwards that now Superman's more infatuated with the idea of the small town girl from high school that, like, would just be, like, devout to him and doesn't care about chasing after... One of the things that I thought they were going to get to, actually, was this idea that Lana cares more about Clark than any idea of Superman. Right?
Yeah.
And I thought they were going to really like split that difference, saying, you know, Lois is always more into Superman. Now, obviously, things get messy when she finds out Superman is Clark, but this idea that one of the appealing elements of Lana to him would be that, oh no, she's actually attracted to Clark, not Superman. And I think they kind of like hint at that in this movie. They never really go really into it, but it is kind of under the surface a little bit.
Yeah, it strikes me as if they were to have continued with this plot thread into 4, that's where it would kind of get its more stretched out, more idealized version of it.
Yeah, I don't know what the context was. I don't know if it was a creative decision, like they had no interest in bringing Lana back, or if Annette O'Toole said, "Hell no, I'm going away." But either way, yeah, she's
you
not in
will
the next
never
one.
see me working on another Superman project ever.
And it's not even that much time later when you think about it. Like, well, I mean, it's almost 20 years. So I guess that's a decent chunk of time. It's 18 years later after this one.
Yeah.
So it's
I mean,
a reasonable amount of time.
I guess how old. Trying to figure out how old Tom Welling was at that point, whether or not he was even born by the time this movie came out. I assume he was. I think he was
absolutely
in his 20s.
He was like famously kind of old actually compared to other like. I mean, I know they always cast older for teenagers in like TV shows at that time, but he was like notably a bit older than everyone else. So by the time the show finished, he was already in his mid-30s, basically.
Ah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm looking here, 77. So he would have been like 5-6 years old when this came out.
So it's yeah, 6. He'd have been 6. Yeah. So yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Well, he wasn't that old when he got cast, I suppose. He was only 21. No, he'd have been 24. Right.
It was 2001, right? That's when the show started.
24.
Yeah, 24.
Yeah, that's kind of pushing it. If he's meant to be like a freshman in high school, 24 is really pushing it.
Yeah, but they gave him the bangs and the mop top. It worked.
Anyway, so we get the dance stuff. Some sparks fly. Next time we see them, like she's the one who's like in charge of like cleaning up the dance hall for some reason, and Clark is there to help her. No one else is offered. So he's being the good guy and helping with that.
Yeah, they explicitly make the point of showing that basically her being stuck in Smallville has resulted in her only romantic prospect being Brad, who is just a drunk and a jerk all the time, and she doesn't want that, but she does have a kid, and she is single, so she kind of wants a father figure for the child.
Yeah, she lays it on quite thick, actually. Because when they go for their picnic a couple of scenes later, and she's like, oh, no one's asking, but, it's really good to have a man around for, right? Like, she keeps, like, just wear a sign saying, I'm looking for a father for my child, please. Like, at the very least, she wants to let Clark know she wants a partner. Like, she's laying it on thick at this point. At one point at the dance, I think it's when she's cleaning up, she says, oh, so you don't realize until later who the one that got away was, and it like focuses in on a photograph of teenage Clark, which notably is a photograph of young Christopher Reeve and not the guy who played Clark in Superman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether or not that's better or worse. Obviously, they have Christopher Reeve's likeness already approved, but would you, as the actor, as teenage Clark, like to be contacted and say, we don't want you in the movie, we just want to use your headshot for a minute? Can we do that? Well,
I mean, if they're going to pay me, this is an easy
well,
paycheck.
They're paying you, yeah. $50 probably, nothing more.
Hey, $50 for just a photograph? I mean, I wouldn't turn that down, probably.
That's fair. I feel like I would want to be able to come back. I want to be like, can we have a flashback sequence of them in their youth one more time so I can, I don't know, say anything?
Yeah, but even that's tough, though, because by this point it's been 5 years since they shot Superman, and he's now, like...
Give him some bangs. It'll make him look younger.
I mean, he was probably obviously older than he was playing at the time, so he's probably like close to 30 now.
Yeah, probably. All right, fine. Do a cut to of the day that he left Smallville. Something like that.
Because I'm assuming that they're 37 in this movie, or maybe 38, depending on what age they were when high school finished. But I assume it's a 20-year reunion.
Yes. So that is actually one weird thing about this, is they specifically point out that this was the class of 1965, which implies that this is 1985, correct?
It's the future, yeah.
Okay. However, later on after that, they show the 1984 Olympics. Because Olympics only happen every 4 years. It has to be 1984.
It's the 19-year anniversary for some reason.
Ah, very common 19-year reunion, of course.
The important one, yes. 19, that's the important number.
Mm-hmm. Also, apparently, according to trivia, some of Richard Pryor's checks were dated as 1983. So, what you got there, big boy?
Enough. It's the 18 year. It's the year an adult.
And the Olympics
now.
were just really, really early.
Look, they clearly didn't give a shit, okay? They did not give a shit how any of this lined up. That's the answer to this. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, obviously things are kind of hitting off, and when Richard Pryor's arriving is when they're leaving to go on a picnic together. So it's Clark, Lana, and the young Ricky, the little boy Ricky,
Yes,
who runs off and apparently hits his head because Clark hears the dog yelping or whatever, and it turns out he's ended up in a field unconscious, and there's a big harvester coming right for him.
What did you think of them actually showing a visual representation of the super hearing in this?
The little semicircles coming from his ear.
Yeah.
I appreciate them trying something to make it clear that this is super hearing. Obviously, it's not great. I would rather sort of something that looks more like a ripple, which is what they would do probably any time from 2000 onwards. But
yeah, I don't even think you need a visual thing. I think if you just add reverb on the sound effect, we get it. We get that this is a super hearing thing. But maybe that wasn't as commonplace back then, that it wasn't visual or theatrical ability of being able to tell that.
Regardless, I actually we complained a lot in the last one, and this was a complaint that also applied to the first movie, is a couple of the transitions into Superman were just fades. I actually think the one they do here, where he's running behind the fence, but obviously there's a lot of gaps in the fence, so you kind of see him anyway, but it's behind the fence, and it does fade, but it does it in a way where there's enough movement to kind of imply that he is changing outfits. I mean, where the suit goes at the end of this, I mean, let's not question that, but at the very least though, it didn't just feel like a straight fade into he's magically in the suit. It felt like I got the impression he was physically changing his outfit and taking it off. So, you know, I'll give it points for that.
I'm still going to put it underneath the police car transition. I think that it's one of the weaker, but it's not a horrible... It's better than just all of a sudden change, for sure.
You said there was... Oh, I think I know one you're counting. I wasn't going to count one of them, because it's not a transition in the same way that these are. But I know what you're talking about.
If you're not counting it, I'm still putting it in second. That's where it would go.
Sure. That's fine. So not counting the big moment I think you were counting earlier, the phone booth's your favorite transition of the movie?
Yeah.
Right, that's
fine. Or
that's
the
fine.
Camera booth, yeah.
Like camera booth, sorry, not the phone booth, yeah. All right, so he saves the boy, it is whatever, and this is where they kind of hit the idea for me that, Lana obviously is impressed that Superman's here. She's thankful that, he saved her boy, right, obviously, but I she immediately says, "Oh, you have to meet Clark," and she turns around and goes, "Oh, Clark, where's Clark?" And then obviously he's sped off, and he comes out of the pipe holding the dog, going, "Oh, I found the dog, here." I was like, okay, they're kind of hitting on something here of this idea that she cares more about Clark than Superman. Obviously she's not bored by Superman, but she's not interested in him in the same way that Lois clearly is the second she sees him.
Right. So I agree. I think that it does a good job with that. However, I think the scene was supposed to set up something, or maybe it's the next scene afterwards, where they're essentially now treating Clark Kent's relationship to Superman the same way as Peter Parker is to Spider-Man, where it's just he can ask for personal favors and they talk fairly frequently, and that feels like it's out of left field for me. I don't like that as a concept.
It feels like it's just to Lana, but it is kind of just sudden. It's basically... Because Clark basically tries to act unimpressed. He's like, "Oh, Superman, that's no big deal." And she's like, "What? You're not impressed by Superman?" He's like, "I live in Metropolis. I see Superman all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." He's downplaying it. He's like, "It's no big deal. It's Superman."
I hear he poops in those red tighty whities, so he's not actually that cool of a guy. But whatever.
Also, you want to get out of Smallville, Lana? You should come to Metropolis. You could do well. Come call on me. I'll be there for you, Lana. Yeah. Anyway, so this kind of wraps up part of this in the sense that he does come back to Smallville, of course, but that's after some other stuff's happened, but the two plots start to intermingle.
Yes, one bit that we skipped over that I just want to mention as part of it is there's
the bowling.
Yeah, the bowling, where Ricky is picked last on bowling teams because apparently you're picking teams for bowling.
I mean, that is a real thing. I've heard of that. Bowling leagues are teams of four.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, it feels weird that these kids go in and they're not just like, oh, let's all just play together because, we're already competing against each other. It's a scored game. but whatever. So Ricky's just like throwing gutter balls. Eventually Brad shows up and is just like, hey kid, let me show you how to throw it. You need a man to show you what's going on. And Clark steps up and says like, hey Brad, he's doing a good job. I don't think we need you to show him anything. And so he passes the ball back over to Ricky. Ricky throws the shot, and then Clark fakes a sneeze to use his super breath to absolutely destroy the entirety of the bowling alley.
The pins just explode, and it makes Ricky look a little badass that no one should mess with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which would be great for that one frame, but now he has 9 more to go. So what's your plan there, Clark?
I don't know. It's a funny bit. They moved on. But you just imagine what happened for the rest of the game.
Right.
The bowling alley shut down because like their alley's been destroyed and they have to like, come in and do repairs.
Ricky has to pay for it. Lana goes deep into debt. Everything's worse. But whatever. He's popular now.
And Clark's just like, just come to Metropolis and live with me. They'll never find you. Like, great idea.
We'll change your name to Lana Kent.
No, he likes the alliteration too much. He loves the Lois Lanes, the Lana Langs, the Lex Luthors. Like he's got a proper
Gus Gormans.
He's got a proper hard on for the LL initial set. So anyway, the whole plot with the villains though is that they've made a bunch of bad weather hit Columbia, and it seems to happen. We kind of see like, I don't know if we see it up front. Maybe we only see it when Richard Pryor starts talking about what he did, but we cut though, and I love how random this is. Robert Vaughn has like a fake ski slope on the top of his skyscraper. It's the most ridiculous, over the top luxury thing I've ever seen a villain have in a movie. It's insane.
I can appreciate him having a ski slope. Like, that works for me. Yeah. What's crazy to me is I've read trivia on, like, apparently that was a ridiculously hard thing for the crew to build, and it took up a lot of money, and it's used for this one scene and nothing else. I'm like, that feels too much for that. Yeah,
very, very strange. You could have just set this scene at an actual like ski like resort or lodge or something, and rather than doing this weird. I mean, I do love the visual of this at the top of the building. It's great, but like, it's not actually that.
You could have done that via compositing as well. You didn't need it to be actually there for that visual.
Well, I'm pretty sure it is composited for being on top of the building, and they didn't build it in the top of a skyscraper.
True, correct, fair enough. But I'm saying, like, they could have just taken any ski slope and composited it on. They didn't need to take the one for a set.
Sure. Well, I mean, they had to do the bit at the end with Pryor, so I guess that's why they felt they need more control over everything. So, yeah. Anyway, so he's in his ski lodge. They're all happy because they're hearing about how all the bad weather's ruining Columbia. They're excited. They're ecstatic, even. And then in walks Pryor. He says, "Oh, it wasn't my fault." And Vaughn's like, "What wasn't your fault?" He's like, "Well, you see, I did all the things, the weather, Columbia, but Superman, he flew in and he fixed everything. He flew a tornado up, so the tornado went inverse and went into the sky." Which, again, I'm not going to even talk about the logic of that.
That's just the ending of the movie Twisters. That's just how that happened.
So what's so funny about this though, this visual, because it does cut to like a cutaway of like this happening, and it's a sort of a dodgy kind of composited effect. I was thinking like, but this is actually the time where him just flying round fast in circles would actually be the believable solution to the thing.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be super. It's got to be something even more over the top.
Anyway, so this is where Vaughn's finally like, "Oh, Superman, we didn't anticipate him. He's too much of a goody two-shoes. We have to figure a way out of this." And out of the background, the bimbo character's like, "Kryptonite? What was that? Or is it kryptonium? Crypt something?" Is it? "No, I remember reading about this in an interview with him." And I'm like, "Superman, why are you talking in interviews about the one thing that hurts you, you fool?"
In fairness, I think that was originally mentioned in the Superman 1 interview. I spent the night with Superman, and that's what Lex did, like, his thing to be able to figure out what it was.
No, because one of the complaints we had is that Lex leaps to this conclusion that the material from his planet would hurt him.
That's right.
Right?
He did leap to it.
Superman didn't know about kryptonite in that interview, so he physically couldn't have mentioned it.
That's right, but he did mention lead.
He mentioned lead.
That was the thing we were complaining his weakness. Right.
Yes, the fact that he can't see through lead. He did bring that up. But that's something that's true about actual X-rays. They can't see through lead, so at least there's some logic to that. which people could figure out if
right.
you know. Anyway, so they're like, damn, this is annoying. We want Superman to be dealt with, and he starts concocting a plan to try and get some kryptonite. And the plan he comes up with is, we'll use that weather satellite. Hey, Pryor, this is your job, right? We'll use that weather satellite to like beam out to where Krypton was and detect parts of like the debris from Krypton, and we'll analyze it. We'll figure out what's in kryptonite, and we'll make our own. That's the plan here. And what it actually ends up leading to is kind of like a red kryptonite story. That's just not actually red kryptonite, but interesting all the same.
Yeah, I kind of really wanted it to be a red kryptonite, because honestly, what we got in the end, it is practically red kryptonite, but the fact that we do get a lump of what appears to be green kryptonite, I feel like Superman was not reacting nearly strongly enough to being handed that, even if it wasn't as effective as we would expect it to be.
I think the point is that he doesn't feel anything from it, so as much as it looks suspiciously like kryptonite, he obviously doesn't feel any pain, so he's just kind of like, oh, this is weird.
True.
Thanks.
But like, if I'm in a public space and there's this random man who comes up and says, hey, I really like the things you do. Here, I want to give you this. And he gives me a big-ass cartoonish bomb with a lit fuse. I'm going to say, are you trying to kill me? What are you doing right now?
Okay, I thought you were referring to the actual scene, and I was about to say that you're very much underselling Richard Pryor's like term, or the way he tries to talk to Superman. He doesn't just say, I like what you do, here's a gift. There's a lot more to it because he's Richard Pryor. So we'll get to that in a second. But this is the plan though. He's going to do this, and obviously when he does analyze the stuff, it's like, oh, 30% this, 20% that, and it's all these like elements we all understand, right? It's all these different kinds of metals and so on and so on. But then there's like 0.57% unknown, which makes sense. It's an alien planet. There might be some extra things that we don't know about on Earth, sure. And he's like, I'll just fill it in. I'll just pick something and put it in. I'll put in tar, right? And he puts in tar, and he's like, that'll do.
He looks at his cigarettes and says, oh, tar, there you go, that's something.
Right? So obviously when he hands it to Superman and there's no pain, it's like, well, I guess it's not real kryptonite. It didn't work.
I guess the 1/200th that is not identifiable might actually be important and can't just be substituted with tar.
Yes. And obviously this all happens when they give him the fake kryptonite. It's in Smallville because Lana called Clark and said, hey, that autograph you got for Ricky from Superman? Well, he kind of lied to all of his friends that Superman was coming to visit him on his birthday next week. And he'll look really bad if he doesn't now. So could you like put in a good word and maybe see what we can? He's like, oh, I can speak for Superman. He'll be there. Don't worry. And I'm like, all right. And then when we cut to the scene in Smallville, he's on a stage and the mayor is giving him a key to the city. Which, by the way, Smallville's not a city. Just first up, it's a town. But
town of Smallville, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like basically Smallville's such a small place that the word spread that he was coming, and Smallville were ready to be like, yeah, we have to celebrate Superman and throw him a parade and give him a celebration and all the rest of it.
Well, it seems like it's specifically also in response to that chemical plant thing earlier, where they're saying like, hey, that was just outside of our town. You really saved our skin there. So here's this token of appreciation.
Yeah, so he awkwardly is accepting all this and shaking hands, kissing babies as you do. And Richard Pryor shows up with a military uniform on, claiming to be a general, doing a voice, doing like, I'm a general voice. And he speaks for like a minute, just saying nonsense. And it gets to the point where he's talking about the plastic the president sits on or something.
It's so completely batshit, where he literally gets up on stage and like he doesn't say anything about Superman at all for like a minute and a half, and he's just going on and on about like, now America is leading in one thing, and that is plastics, and the crowd's like, yeah, plastics. And he's like, yeah, and all you sitting on your butts in your perfectly formed seats with that plastic, would you like the president signing peace treaties pen to fall apart because we don't have plastics in America? And he's just kind of riling up the crowd for whatever reason, and they're like, no, we want the president to have good pens. And then he says, well, Superman here saved the chemical plant. Thank you, Superman. And like, I guess that was it. That was the whole tie together.
Yeah. And he opens the box, hands him the fake kryptonite, and Superman clearly has the reaction of, it's pretty, thanks. Yeah. What is it?
It's an emerald. It feels like plastic. Are we doing a plastic thing?
For some reason, one of my distinct memories of this movie, for some reason, is when Richard Pryor picks up the fake kryptonite from the lab, who have put it together for him. The fact that he sort of holds it with like old school dot matrix printer paper is what I always remember. Like, there's like a little detail I always remember about this movie is just that paper crunching as he's picking up this fake kryptonite. For some reason, that just sticks in my mind as something I always remember.
I did like that sequence though, because he's holding it and he's like holding it with such gentle, he's afraid that he's going to get hurt by it. And then he has the realization of like, wait a minute, why am I worried? I'm a human. Like, it doesn't affect me. And all I could think of as a comic nerd is like, nah, that thing's going to give you cancer. It's just going to be much later down the road.
Well, I mean, I think you have to have prolonged exposure to be fair.
Oh, probably, yeah. But this is synthetic. Maybe it's the same as like asbestos. Any part of it's going to give you cancer.
Yes. He's made super asbestos with this concoction. That's what's happened. So, anyway, Superman sits down. Nothing's happened. Richard Pryor's getting chewed out on the phone for not killing Superman. Like Vaughn has the audacity to say, I asked you to do one simple thing, kill Superman, and you couldn't do it. And I'm like, whoa. What part of that request is simple? You're not familiar with Superman's like game here? Like, what?
Yeah.
What's going on?
I love that line though, because it has to be tongue in cheek. They have to know it's like just one tiny little barely noticeable thing. Kill a god, and you couldn't do it.
It's like I don't know, asking someone to like, hey, I asked you to like hack into the White House and do this, and you couldn't do that one simple little thing I asked.
In fairness, all he would have to do is type in at the computer, hack into White House, and it would work. So...
No, you used to ask a new enemy of the White House, Elon Musk, to like give you a back door, because now he hates everything in the White House.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Plot twist.
I've actually not been keeping up with news, so that's surprising to me.
Oh, it's been a swerve. He's left the government. Right. He's saying all these things about... So let's not get into it. It's all political, but it's...
Fun.
Yeah, twists have happened. Would you believe that the two man babies couldn't stay friends for very long?
Yeah. Who would have thought that the two biggest egos in America couldn't actually exist in the same space? Crazy.
So this is okay. This is all happening, right? Vaughn at this point has already had the thought, because the sister kind of put in his ear, hey, if we can control the coffee with all this satellite stuff, we could control the oil. And like but they can't do it until they get rid of Superman. However, there's a little delayed effect to this fake kryptonite. Superman's hanging out at Lana's place. She's made him lunch. He's all very happy about it. He's being all nice. But then it starts to hit him. The feeling starts to kick in where he feels a little bit weird. And she's like, oh, I just got off the phone. There's been a road accident. There's a truck dangling off the bridge, like, 2 miles that away. Superman, you need to go. Like, off you go. And Superman's like, no rush. Come over and sit next to me, sweet cheeks. And I was like, what? What's happening?
she literally is just like, oh, don't you think you should get going? Like, you got to get to him. And he's like, I always make it in time. Let's have a seat. And he's like, I mean, he's not wrong, but that's very strange.
I love her reaction. Like, it cuts to her face after he says that, and she's just, her mouth's wide open. She's just kind of in shock. And it's like, it's kind of this weird no man's land of like, is she mortified? Is she kind of like not turned on, but like, feels like desired because he's like pushing off a disaster to hang around with her? Like, it feels like I was actually kind of shocked in hindsight, because again, I've seen this movie before, but like, I'm kind of surprised they didn't do a thing here where she actually kind of like he tries to make a move and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, like I'm kind of like into someone, or just turns him down in some way. I was expecting that.
I will say, because, and I think it's intentional, but the way that they're just in the living room and he is obviously, she's not feeling comfortable because a man is dangling for his life somewhere across town.
Yeah.
But the way that he sits down in full costume is just framed so awkwardly, where it's like meant to feel this sort of like, this feels weird. I don't like this. But I feel like if he wasn't in costume, it would have gone down by about 50%. It's specifically because he's dressed as Superman, trying to lay the moves that it's like, what are we doing here?
Look at my bulge, Lana. Look into my bulge.
There's no codpiece here. It's all Kryptonian.
So yeah, eventually he's like, you know what, you're right, I should get going. Almost like he's not taking full effect yet. And he flies to this bridge, but before he gets there, the truck falls into like the water below. And he lands and says, how can I help? And the firefighter's like, oh, nothing now, but if only you'd been here a minute sooner. And he looks a little concerned at that, obviously, but...
Yeah, the dude did get pulled out. Like, he was safe. It's not like a guy died because he was trying to get his balls off there.
Yeah. But as this is like, next time we see him, things are starting to change, right? We get like a... Not a montage, but we get kind of a montage. Obviously, the first big thing he does is that he's flying over Pisa, right, in Italy, and he sees the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and as badly as composited as these guys in front of the tower are, I do think it's a funny bit that Superman straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and this guy whose entire business is he sells mementos of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it's all just these little statues of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which have all just become out of date because now it's not leaning anymore. And he looks very upset by this, and this is getting a great payoff at the end, honestly. Which, to just go to that, what I think is so funny about the ending to this, which is almost the final scene where he goes back to Pisa to correct this and makes it leaning again, and this guy has replaced all of his statues with straight towers of Pisa. I think what makes this so funny to me is the fact that it's good Superman who's doing this at the end, but this is still upsetting this man so much is really funny.
Yeah. Superman's undoing everything he did when he was a jerk, but then this one guy had already adapted his business, so screw you, Superman.
Oh, it's good stuff. But yeah, we see a variety of things. The funny one, and I do love how creative they get with how much of a dick like evil Superman is here.
Yeah.
He's at the Olympics, the guy's running up with a torch, right? And he's like, oh, he's going to light the flame with a torch. It's not been out in however long, blah, blah, blah. And people are waving the flags. And Superman's up at the billboard, just kind of yawning. And he just decides to blow out the torch at the last possible second so that he can't light the flame.
I love how it holds on it, too. Because you get the guy, he just looks at it and he just kind of like looks around nervously, shrugs, and starts awkwardly walking back down the steps. And they hold it for way too long, but it just makes it funnier as it goes on.
Yeah, it's really creatively petty, just this little dick move that he made. As this is going on, his suit's getting a little darker. Like he's dirty or whatever, but it's like not quite as bright anymore.
Yeah, he's got like I always consider Clark at least to have very white skin comparatively. Like maybe that's just lighting or whatever, but this guy, it's a lot dirtier, a lot tanner. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow starting to grow in as well. His hair is not as perfectly coiffed. It's got a little bit of ruggedness to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to ask me what the good Superman part of this movie is, it's basically this plot of him being on like the fake kryptonite and then the conclusion to that. And I think it's just funny to see Christopher Reeve have to act like a bit of a shitty Superman, like get to see him unleash a little bit.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think he does that really, really well. I think like having this sort of split here where it's the same sort of difference between Clark and Superman. It's like, okay, you still have to be Superman. You still have to have that sort of presence about you. But now you have to have this, not even slow decline. I feel like it happens pretty quickly in terms of editing, but you have to have this change where we still believe that you're the same guy underneath, but now you're a jerk. And I think he does a great job of threading that.
Also, somewhere around here or soon after here is when Lana makes the choice that she's going to go to Metropolis with Ricky. And she picks up the phone after, I think Brad's called her again. She's like, oh, damn, I'm sick of this guy. And like, oh, I want to move. I'm going to phone. And she picks up the phone and says, hey, Smallville Airport? When's your next flight to Metropolis? And I'm like, Smallville doesn't have an airport. Are you crazy?
Of course they do. There's another reason why I found that hilarious of her picking up the phone right then and saying like, oh, I just want to catch a plane over to Metropolis, is that at that moment, for other reasons we'll get to, the entire world is currently undergoing a massive oil crisis.
Yes, that's also
and
true.
Nobody's able to get gas. And you think that you're just going to be able to be like, oh, can I just catch a plane over to Metropolis? Like, that's going to be so easy to do.
Yeah, this feeds straight into the villain's plot, because basically like Robert Vaughn realizes that Superman being a dick, and it's in newspapers that Superman's kind of an asshole now. It's like, oh wait a minute, like our kryptonite didn't like do what we expected it to, but it has done this. Like right after that happens when he started doing this. So at the very least, he's not a Boy Scout anymore. So we can proceed with plan, control all the oil. And they explain to Richard Pryor that with the computer and the satellite, blah, blah, he's going to make the computer tell all the ships to all go to the middle of the Atlantic and just not deliver their oil to anywhere, all the tankers. And Richard Pryor actually points out a plot hole here where he says, do these ships not have captains? And the movie just hand waves it by the villain going, oh, they're just there for like, oh, you know, show. It's like a legacy thing. They want to have like, you know, some old traditions. They have a captain, but he's just there to, you know, for you know, heritage sake.
I mean, in fairness, like, yes, the captain will determine where the ships goes, but they make the point of saying, like, we can just hack in and give them false directions, and the captain will listen to whatever the false directions are. And we see that pretty much every shipping container of oil does that. Like, and they also use the computers to turn off all the oil pumps as well, so that there's no new oil coming out simultaneously.
So, yeah, all barring one ship where one captain's like, these are nonsense orders. I'm going to Metropolis like I'm supposed to.
And this is where we finally get the villains and Superman like directly interacting in an actual evil scheme.
There's one moment I want to point out before we get to that, though. It's at the start of this scene where they're explaining the plan to Richard Pryor, because there's another important thing in here as well, actually. Where Richard Pryor pulls out some napkins that he's drawn on. He's designed a new computer. Apparently his savant status with computers also means he can design complete new ones from scratch. So he's got this, and Robert Vaughn's all into it because he says, oh, this computer will be able to do anything you ask it to, or anything I ask it to at the very least. So he's like, oh, tell me more. But at the start of this scene, what I want to talk about is this is the depth to the bimbo character, right?
Yeah.
Lorelei, they kind of get to. They kind of already teased it actually in hindsight with the kryptonite line where she knew that. But here, before everyone else arrives, she's there on her own and she's reading a book and she's sort of saying out loud to herself. And it's something, I think it's the computer stuff she's talking about, but it doesn't really matter though.
No. Well, it's philosophy. It's Immanuel Kant.
Right. So she's talking about the philosophy, and she basically starts like talking to herself. Like, oh, I don't think I agree with this writer. And she starts throwing out terms like, oh, she's really knowledgeable about these concepts she's talking about. But then she hears the elevator ding, and she throws the book under a pillow, pulls out like a gossip magazine, and starts doing the high pitch voice. It's like, oh, hi, honey, are you home? And although I did laugh though that when she like gets out of position with the magazine, she actually kicks the pillow away that's hiding the book. So the book's actually just sitting there out the entire shot after that point,
right?
Which is really funny to me. But go on.
Yeah. No, I really like that because it's like you said, the kryptonite thing kind of hints at it, where she says it so confidently, like she knows kryptonite is the answer, but then she covers it up with the like, or did I mean this? Did I mean that? But you can write that off as just like, oh, they're just writing a joke for that character where like she wasn't sure if she got the right name. Putting in this bit here, and then there's another like one or two later on in the third act, really gives this strange depth to the character of she is in this essentially as, it seems like a trophy wife sort of thing. Like she recognizes that as long as she hangs around this rich guy, she's able to get like rich off of that. She doesn't actually fall under this stupid bimbo tag that she's been hit with, but she knows she has to play that part in order to get the sort of pampering that she would want out of this. So it's a weird depth for a character that ultimately is not a massive part of the plot, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not she kind of like realized that she was being branded this way and played into it to exploit her, or she made an active choice to like give this like vibe off to begin with. Like she's like, oh, I'm going to make a character that's going to appeal to idiot men, and I'm going to like exploit them like intentionally from the start. Either way, it sets up this idea she's much smarter than she lets on, and maybe has almost, it's actually kind of like similar to Richard Pryor's character in a sense where she's not that evil. She's kind of like colluding with evil people, and she's kind of involved in their plans, but ultimately she's not as bad as they are. If anything, maybe one of my critiques, as much as it's maybe a pointless endeavor to have like a proper critique of like the third act of this movie, is that maybe she shouldn't have been lumped together with the other two that she seems to be. It feels like she should have maybe had more of a redemptive quality that Richard Pryor got to get, just based on the fact that she seemed to care about Superman being hurt and all the rest of it. But we'll get into all that.
Yeah, I think that they do give a little bit of redemption, but that's only because of this very next sequence where she interacts with Superman.
I don't think it's just because of that, though. I mean, I could be wrong, but like either way, Like okay, like this one ship is refusing to like go where we want it to. It's going to ruin the oil shortage. Although I'm pretty sure just one tanker getting to the entirety of the US is not going to be enough to fulfill the demand. But you know,
can I also just point out, like, his whole thing is that he's supposed to be filling the demand. Everyone will have to buy his oil. Is he following up on that? Because it seems like nobody has any.
Yeah, he's not really like there's no way he's actually profiting from this yet. I can only assume that he's eventually going to start like letting them one by one under his control. Like so the idea is that like everyone's missing it so much and there's so much of a crisis that they'll like everyone will pay him whatever they ask to like get the oil supply. I don't know. Anyway,
No, makes sense.
So their whole plan here is that Lorelei hangs out, and once again, why are you emphasizing the Statue of Liberty, right? It's supposed to be Metropolis. Stop it.
Yeah.
But she's hanging out at the top of the not Empire, sorry, the Statue of Liberty. Get my landmarks mixed up. She's sitting at the top of this in a dress, looking all not like a damsel. She's kind of just waiting casually for Superman to show up. He does catch her. Sees her there. He comes down, and Superman literally says, I hope you're not expecting me to save you, because I don't do that anymore.
And she's like, no, not at all. Would you like to have some fun? I just need you to do one little thing for me first.
Yeah, she gets all close to him, runs her hand up and down his chest, and gets all flirty. But hey, like, we can have some fun. I just need you to do one little thing. There's this little oil tanker that's not going where it's supposed to. So Superman flies out to this tanker and just punches a hole in the side of it and creates an oil spill, which is especially a dickish move, one might say. Beyond just the tanker and the supply issue, just the oil get into the water where the, you know, some fishies might be, is, you know, a bit of a problem, typically.
Yep.
So,
Superman, you are a menace to society. There was one bit, I think it was actually during that sequence where she's reading the comic book and all that. They're listening to a TV station or something that's saying, you know, Superman has been censured by all of the countries in the UN except for Colombia, because they still think he's cool after the tornado thing.
Yes. Also, somewhere around here, the couple that get injured in Colombia from the weather want to sue Perry White, and they're upset at him.
Oh,
so that's like just an end to that little running gag.
Yeah, it's literally just walking. It's like, Perry White, you're going to pay out the ass. And then it just ends with nothing, I assume, because how is that his fault?
Yeah. Yeah, the weather's somehow Perry White's fault. So, yeah, the thing I did genuinely forget, though, is that Superman flies to the fake ski slope, right? The cabin that's at the top of the skyscraper, and she's waiting for him, and the scene just fades away as he's getting on top of her, implying quite thoroughly that Superman got some in this movie with this character, which I did not remember that, like, them following through with that, so fair enough.
So if we're following through with the movie's series logic, that means that at this point he was currently depowered, because that's the only way that you can be with a human, right?
Well, to be fair, we came up with that when trying to explain why he had to become human in Superman 2. The movie never said that it was physically unsafe for him to have sex with a human woman.
Fair enough.
We deduced that.
I like to believe that it was unsafe, and then the next sequence we see Lorelei, she just has like a full body cast, and she's like, worth it.
No, she's perfectly fine. So clearly it was a-okay. So it's like, okay, now he can do his oil thing. Like now this one ship's not causing any trouble, and from this point on, it kind of breaks into two things, where the villains kind of fade into the background, all on the fact that we see that they're building this computer in like a really weird remote location in the middle of a cliff or something. Sure, whatever. But to finish off the Superman stuff, where he even, like, you know, we get the famous scene where he's like firing the peanuts at the booze in the bar, which they recreated on Supergirl when that show was on, when she was on Red Kryptonite. So fun bit. But Lana and Ricky run into him.
I do want to call out in that sequence, though, there's a mirror behind, and he uses heat vision on the mirror to like melt it. Yeah, that's some of the best like effects, like physical, practical effects, I assume, in this movie. Like, I 100% believe that he was actually melting that mirror as it happened. So kudos on that.
Worth calling out. Ricky sees Superman, tries to talk to him, and Larry's like, no, he's changed, son. And he's like, no, he's just sick. Get better, Superman, get better. And I think maybe the implication is that this child's voice yelling get better is maybe what like got through his head to lead to what we get next.
I like how the kid even calls it out, because Superman starts flying away because he doesn't want to hear it. But you hear the kid say, like, no, he can still hear me. He has super hearing. Get better, Superman. And so Superman has to deal with that as he's flying away. He's like, God damn it, this kid getting in my head.
Yeah, so he ends up in a junkyard, right? And I'm going to say it. This is legitimately a fantastic scene. Now, the logic of, like, you know, is he actually split into two entities? Is it all in his head? Whatever you want to like interpret it as, I don't care. This is a case of like the vibes, the purpose of the scene, and the ending are perfect to the point where, like, I think there's an argument that this might be the best scene in any of the 4 movies. Now, obviously, Superman 3 is nowhere near as good as 1 or 2, right? There's no doubt in that. Yeah. But as an individual sequence, this scene where like Clark Kent splits out from evil Superman and then they fight, and like evil Superman fights dirty and does all these things, like, you know, like, he blows acid at him. Why there's a big vat of acid in the junkyard, let's not question that too much.
I loved it because it has a little sign next to it and everything. This is caution, giant vat of acid.
I guess the argument might be, oh, it's for dissolving metals, it's a junkyard, but like I'm pretty sure pits of acid don't exist in junkyards.
Especially not without fences, at the bare minimum.
And then, you know, he puts them in the trash compactor and all the rest of it. Clark at one point throws tires around evil Superman and he splits them in half. All this plays out, and like Clark never says anything, but Superman, well, actually I think at one point he says, I can give as good as I can get. He does say that, but mostly Superman's the one doing the trash talking, where he's like, oh, you know, you've always wanted this, blah blah blah. And the scene plays out, and I think is entertaining. I think there's a lot of fun little set pieces in it, right? But that moment at the end where Clark Kent gets his arms or his hands around Superman's neck and he's strangling him until he fades away, and then the main theme hits, he stands up straight and opens his shirt to reveal the S and then flies off as Superman. It's cinema. It's perfect. Okay?
It is. No, I agree. I think my only criticism with that entire bit of like the end of there is that I would have liked it to be maybe something else besides like a crossfade in order to get rid of the other Superman, like some other effect. But it is such a minor nitpick for what is essentially just like a fantastic sequence, and leading into the theme playing again, also perfect with the shirt opening up. That's the second best transition I assume that you figured out there.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't call this a trend. I mean, yes, it's a transition, but it's like, I would say it's not a transition in the other ones, because the other ones are all like, oh, how he does it is super speed, and we were critiquing like how that looks and stuff. This is more just the shirt opening, and that's kind of it.
And that's fine. If you want to take it that way, that's fine. Yeah. But I count it as second if you count it. No, there's that, and then the other bit is it right after Clark says, I can give as good as I can get.
Yeah.
It cuts over to the jerk Superman, and there's just this vicious anger and like fire in him, and he's like just like shouting out like, all right, come on, and like I have not seen this from Christopher Reeve, and the fact that he's able to deliver that here in contrast to his character of Clark as well is just, I have nothing bad to say about pretty much this whole sequence, except every once in a while one of the little things they do in the fight feels a little hokey, but it still works. It's still good the whole way through.
Yeah, it works. It's this idea of like, you know, like the good side of him trying to fight this like infection or this bad side that's been created and trying to win out in the end. It's like, it's simple enough, and it just, like I say, it builds to that moment that it's just the perfect way to end it, and like give him that moment where he stands up, the theme plays, and just as the main bit of the theme ends, the shirt rips open. And it's like, okay, Superman's back. He's off to go fix things. First thing he does is the oil spill. Now, I do have to complain about this. I don't know how he super breaths the oil back into the tanker. That is stupid.
The answer is very carefully.
It's very stupid. And the fact that you see him like rebend the metal back that he punched out before, whilst continually blowing at the oil, so you see the oil kind of rippling about like behind the hole. Like, from a physics perspective, it's all just a bit weird, and there's no way he would be able to control it with his breath like this. It's just kind of stupid.
I mean, Oil, I believe, even in ocean open water, is still going to float on top. So I can at least believe that if it's sitting on top, he can at least corral it into a smaller area. Getting it back up into the ship, yeah, that's a little bit extra. That's a step too far.
It also shows that he doesn't do that, though. He literally just stands in front of the spill and starts blowing, and it magically all starts just funneling up into the ship.
Computers. Since it seems to be the answer for everything else.
If anything, what he should have done is what he did earlier in the movie, and like use his super breath to create a sheet of ice under it, so he could pick it up, maybe, and then sort of, I don't know,
just like funnel it in, just kind of like crack the ice, funnel it into the hole.
Yeah. There's an idea there. I do like him using his heat vision though to weld the metal back shut. Although I was thinking maybe heat vision right up against oil is a bad idea for obvious reasons, but.
I want someone to just like do like a full deep fake CGI remake of this scene and just add a shot where he's flying away from the ship and in the background you see it explode because the oil caught on fire.
So yeah, obviously the big thing though is like he goes to like the lodge again to fight, and basically the villains expected that he'd eventually just become himself again, so they left him a video saying, Superman, you've became your old self again. Well, come and find us here. And they want him to come to where their computer, the new fancy supercomputer is, because they've got it rigged. The entire like area of canyons is all rigged with missiles and all sorts of shit. And they think they can take down Superman if he comes into his trap.
So the moment where we cut to the screen and it's the sister saying, Superman, well, here's where you can find us.
Yeah.
Marks the exact turning point where there's still one or two bright spots, but for the most part, I'm kind of done with the villain side of things. I think they've went too far, too cartoonish, and it's just not working for me anymore.
I mean, it's absolutely not working. I will. The only counterpoint I will make is that I do think that they've went over they've went too far that they're not kind of entertaining anymore. But I think it gets so ridiculously cartoony in the third act that it kind of comes back round to just being laughably amazing.
I get what you're saying, and I see that. However, I was kind of like at a certain point, I had no reason to think this was going to happen, but I kind of thought they were setting up for a well-known villain. I kind of thought like they were going to go that extra mile.
I see where you're going with it, but the moment where Robert Vaughn tries to, like, with the computer, like, hit Superman with missiles, and effectively a Nintendo game of the era comes up on screen as the targeting system, and he's trying to hit Superman, is the moment where I just, like, I give up, but I also start laughing hysterically, because I'm like, this is so wildly stupid, and I kind of love it. I also do kind of love how stupid, because out of nowhere, right? So the whole thing is Superman eventually gets in, they're all in there with the computer, and they they blast Superman with this weird thing that puts a bubble around him, which they think, that's dealt with them, but then Superman uses his heat vision to get out of it. Okay, that's not worked. Turns out this computer can just make up any defenses at once, so it's just it makes a kryptonite beam. It fires kryptonite energy at him, so that's defeating him.
Well, can I just point out that obviously the computer analyzed the cellophane S from the second movie and used that as its initial line of defense. That's pretty obvious where they went there.
Okay. I'll take that.
Secondly, you're kind of skipping over the strange bit where they're up at the top of the canyon. Richard Pryor doesn't want to take a balloon-powered floating bicycle thing down to the bottom of the canyon, so he decides to take a donkey instead. And so he arrives later than them. But I really do want to comment on the balloon-powered bicycle thing, because why? This isn't even funny. This is just a puzzling choice of transportation.
I have to be honest, I kind of just glossed over it for the sake of time, but you feel very strongly on it, so it's fine. Yes, by all means, voice your disbelief.
I mean, it's not like, look, if you're talking about it in terms of like, Superman, it's already crazy in its own right, like the Nintendo game thing, at least it felt like it was going for a comedic bit. It at least felt like, it's funny that this rocket system is controlled by what is essentially a video game with a score ticking up on the side.
Yeah.
The balloon thing just, it felt too like, oh yeah, this is obviously the only way down into the canyon for me to think that it's a comedy bit. They were playing it too straight in a way for something that's the weirdest. You know what it reminds me of? It reminded me of our Extra Reels episode of The Avengers, where all of a sudden we cut to a room full of bears at a boardroom table. Like, we're just treating this as normal, and no one's acknowledging that it's not.
I don't think it's quite on the same level as that. Also, David's referring to the 1998 film The Avengers,
Yes.
just to be clear for anyone who thought he was referencing anything Marvel
No.
related.
It's the 2012 version, but it's the Joss Whedon cut. You got to look hard for it.
Okay. Yeah, the one with the bears, the bear cut.
Uh-huh. Yeah, find it.
No, I mean, like, obviously, like, I complained in the first movie when I brought up that sometimes the defense of the stupid stuff that's even in that one is, well, there's a man flying, so everything's fair game. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's a bullshit reason. I do not accept that in any way, shape, or form. Everything else should still function with some reasonable level of disbelief so that, like, Superman feels special. But this movie's ship has sailed on that long ago. So I'm not operating in that logic. So obviously, yes, this video game thing where it even says game over at the end is stupid as shit. But it's so stupid that I was laughing maniacally at the concept. And then firing all the missiles they've got at Superman doesn't work. But anyway, so yeah, the bubble thing happens. They shoot kryptonite lasers at him. And that's working. The kryptonite beam's working. But at this point, Richard Pryor and Lorelei are both going, you're hurting them here. This is kind of bad. Let's not do this, maybe. So they're both feeling that way, but they're kind of trying to pretend that they're not. But Richard Pryor's the one who takes action. He's the one who... The yo-yo comes into it, because to get down to the ground floor where all of the other computer stuff is, he zip lines with the yo-yo on one of the cables, which I can only imagine really hurt. Like, if you were holding onto a yo-yo string, that would dig into your hand if your whole body weight was on it. If not, just break.
Look, I was going to say, he's going down what is clearly like a serrated metal wire with a piece of thread. He's going to go about 1/4 of an inch and it's going to snap. But sure, whatever.
Yeah, it's the least of the unbelievable problems of this act, let's be honest.
Also, the entire thing is he's like, all right, I got to take out the power system. And he figures out that all he has to do is take out this one screw.
Yes.
And that's it. That's going to shut off the power system.
Well, he did design this computer, so he would know.
That's fair, but like, if we're talking about points of failure here, I think one screw disabling all the power seems a bit much.
Well, yeah, luckily though, the movie out of nowhere says this computer has become sentient and decides immediately to start doing things on its own to protect itself. So it blasts Richard Pryor with some electricity across the room. When Lorelei tries to run away, it makes like a sphere of like electricity that stays there and holds her up against the wall, and she's like begging Superman for help. Which again, I thought at this point she was quite sympathetic. She wanted to help Superman. She felt hurt by the fact that Superman said, "Hey, that wasn't me the other night. Like, that man's gone," and she felt a bit hurt. I was like, "Oh, I actually feel it feels like she actually cared about asshole Superman in a way," and she a little bit of sympathy. So. Where it gets fun to me, though, again, stupid fun, really stupid, is when it just decides it wants to steal the sister character, right? The evil sister is pulled into the machine with cables and wires, and it starts just putting bits of metal and like little electrodes on her, and it basically... I think I like it because it's like maybe the first thing I ever saw in my life that could be described as like techno horror, where she is basically consumed like Tetsuo the Iron Man and turned into a robotic drone for the computer. Yes. And we get this weird villain for the last like 2 minutes of the movie before Superman thinks of a plan that will defeat this computer.
Yes. So I'm just going to throw out there is Brainiac. Like this was in some version of the script. It should have been Brainiac.
It should. If they were going down this path, it should be Brainiac. But it's not Brainiac. I'm going to say that this is not Brainiac in any way, shape, or form. I get that it being computer adjacent and AI and whatever, you think Brainiac, but it's not Brainiac.
No, that's fair. But like clearly with the level of, even when the sister comes out, I'm like, are we doing a Brainiac thing? Is that this universe's version of Brainiac? No. Is that it's just a supercomputer that like gains sentience? It doesn't. It's not given a name. It's just the computer. But like, it's so close that I think if they gave you like, honestly, from the trivia I read, apparently the initial like way first draft plan was a duo villain movie with Brainiac and Mxyzptlk. So maybe this was the one thing that kind of carried through all the revisions of we want it to be about computers, and Brainiac was the initial inciting incident to that, but it ended up with what it was. But I kind of wish they would have kept it at some version of Brainiac.
How did you say Mxyzptlk?
However you just said it there.
I mean, I'm not convinced I'm the one that's right on that, to be fair, but I just you said it in a way that I don't say it, so I'm just
I think I said Mxyzptlk.
Mxyzptlk.
I think I'm going off the animated series because they definitely have a spit in that
Right,
in the
okay.
animated series.
That's why you just call him Mixie for short, because it's easy to say.
Yeah, yeah.
So remember that acid that if it hit up would eat through anything? Well, Superman flies off to the chemical plant, he comes back with that, and he puts it in like the main bit of the chamber with the computer. And by the way, this set, I want to point out as well, there's like these big like electrodes coming down from the ceiling of this like, you know, cave or whatever we're in. So it almost looks like an electrical version of Krypton at a certain point when you look up at the ceiling.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, it's fair.
So anyway, this acid starts to heat up, and it starts, I can only call it jizzing onto parts of the computer system. It starts just going splitting like some, you know, goo onto it, and then it starts to melt, and then the entire thing crumbles, and you know, death, destruction, and luckily everyone survived. Because it's not like Superman did much to actually make sure they all survived.
Except the sister, right? Like the sister was dead.
She's dead, but I think she was a goner because she'd already been taken by the computer as a drone. I don't think she had a chance of surviving.
Nah.
So, yeah, and that's why I was saying, like, when he's flying with Richard Pryor after the fact, because, you know, Superman, when he was down by the kryptonite, he saw Richard Pryor turn it off. He also saw Richard Pryor take an axe to the beam thing. He's like, no, you're hurting him, and he starts hitting it with the axe. So Superman saw Richard Pryor try to save him. Like, he was going out of his way to try and help him. So Superman's pretty on board with Richard Pryor at this point. But I felt kind of bad for Lorelei, because when he's flying with Richard Pryor and he's saying, Richard says, hey, what about the other people? He's like, oh, they'll have to go and speak to the police now. And part of me thought, I feel like Lorelei should maybe get like a slightly more lenient, you know, like fate, you know, versus the other two. But, you know, whatever.
Let me run this by you real quick, and we don't have to spend too long on it, but in a different version where Gene Hackman and the rest of the cast showed up again, can you see a version where everything maps 1-to-1 of Hackman is obviously Vaughn, we get Lorelei is played by Miss Taxmacher, and then we have Otis actually somehow being a computer savant, which would kind of explain why he is not good at computers at the beginning and just suddenly knows how it works?
Okay. Because Taskmaster was slightly sympathetic to Superman already, so I could see that playing into this. I feel like the only part there that doesn't work is the Otis being the computer guy, just because I feel like this character was formed out of, like, we need to give Richard Pryor a character, so we've formed it around that, as opposed to we had someone that already fit. But
that's fair.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Just it seems strange to me that the villain group had, you know, obviously there's still the sister characters unaccounted for, but it's close to the same sort of layout.
Yeah. There's definitely some similarities, which is also something to be critical of. Is like, wait, they just went with a similar type of villain. You know, I think that's a fair critique. Like Superman, he may not have the Batman rogue gallery, but he's still got a rogue gallery. There's still other villains to go with, and yeah. And the fact that 4 doesn't even do anything new either. You know, I mean, it does Nuclear Man, but that's just a made-up thing with Lex back again.
Who?
Nuclear Man, sorry.
Okay, sorry. You said it weird.
Yes. I said it like, you know, the English language. So, yeah, I mean, he drops off Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor's so scared of flying that he says, just leave me here, I'll go get the bus from here. Superman vouches for him to get a job here because he's good with computers, and he says, yeah, I think I'll just go get the bus. I think this is for me. Yep. So he walks off.
And then he picks up a piece of coal, Superman, and crushes it into a diamond. And we see what he does with that when he gets back to Smallville.
Yes. Well, Metropolis. It's a hotel in Metropolis, I think they're at when he does that.
Oh, that's right. She did manage to actually catch a flight despite an oil crisis going on. Never mind.
Yeah, because they ran into him outside the bar. That was in Metropolis.
Yeah. You're right.
And Pryor says that he's buddies with Superman and does the little thing where he rips open the shirt, but there's nothing there but a white t-shirt. Which we kind of glossed over that earlier. We glossed over entirely him putting on like the tablecloth as the cape and then skiing off the side of the building. It's in the scene where he's explaining that Superman got in the way of the Columbia stuff. But he accidentally skis off the building and survives on his own because he somehow skis down a slope of glass that's near the bottom of the building and then just skis onto the road. And it's the most ridiculous, over-the-top comedy pratfall ever. And he just walks away.
Yeah. Like, he looks back up at the building, and I think he recognizes I should be dead. But he's like, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm just gonna do.
I can't believe I glossed over that. But it's so unimportant to everything that happens. Right. I guess maybe they're going for the idea later on, because I was going to say that his fear of like the heights and the flying is out of nowhere, but maybe they're arguing that experience is what made him scared of heights.
Possibly.
Okay, that kind of works, I guess.
I mean, he went up to the top of a skyscraper without issue. You would think that would be something that would trigger him, but he wasn't acting like it at all. So maybe that's what they were going for.
It's a new thing, because of this fall. Anyway, Clark gives Lana a ridiculous-sized diamond ring, which obviously Brad shows up miraculously and sees this and assumes it's an engagement ring. And to be honest, this should be an engagement ring. It's a giant ass diamond. Like, if I give a woman a diamond like this, of course it's an engagement ring. Like, wild.
I mean, I think he made a mention of saying like, "Oh, I couldn't find your ring you lost earlier," or something like that. Yeah. So maybe there was the implication that it's a replacement, but it's ridiculously sized.
Brad tries to fight Clark, and Clark just dodges until Brad like dives into the trolley that's outside the room and goes into the elevator, again in a comedy pratfall.
Yep. But Brad's got to get his comeuppance because he's a dick.
Yeah. Well, Richard Lester loves the comedy pratfall, which is why we have so many of them.
Oh yeah,
in this movie.
Then we get the wrap up at the Daily Planet.
Yes, they've replaced the old bingo machine with an electronic one, which starts smoking and malfunctioning when Perry hits the button. So there you go. There's a payoff to the bingo jingo stuff. And that was the name of it, by the way. I didn't just make that up. It's called the Jingle Bingo when they're playing it.
Which sounds vaguely like a slur, but...
It does. That's why I'm pointing out it was there, because I realized when I said it, that sounds kind of problematic. I'm going to clarify what I meant by that.
Yeah.
So Lois is back from her vacation and apparently stumbled into a major corruption ring when she was in the vacation. So she's got a page one story, even though she was supposed to be not working. And then she says, "Hey, Clark, I read that story about Smallville. It was kind of nice. Why don't I take you out to lunch and you can tell me about it?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I've got plans with Perry's new secretary." And then walks Lana. He's got Lana a job at the Daily Planet. And she sees the ring and says, "Oh, hey, look at the size of that rock." And Lana's like, "Yeah, I was surprised when Clark gave it to me." And they do a close-up on Lois's face, which do kind of suggest just a little tinge of jealousy, like, "Oh, that actually made me feel something. Clark's interested in someone that's not me, and I feel conflicted about that." And it almost feels like we could actually do something interesting with this in a fourth movie, potentially, if they continued forward, but obviously that's not going to be it. Because they might have done the weird, like, love triangle where, Lois is into Superman, Lana's into Clark, and, like, Superman/Clark has to, Sophie's choice his way out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would have loved to see that happen. Ultimately, with what the quality of the movies end up being from this onwards,
That's true.
I'm kind of glad we didn't have to go through that. But if it were good, I could see it being a very well-done story.
All of this is in the ideal scenario of it being executed well, is what I'm proposing here. Not the quality we get in Superman 4 handling it.
Right.
But yeah, so that does that. He goes and fixes the Tower of Pisa, back to leaning, and smiles flying off once more. There you go.
Yep.
Boom. Superman 3's done.
Cool.
It's a ride. Like, you know what? Like, it's full of interesting bits to talk about, if nothing else. It's not a good movie. It's like sloppy. It's got weirdly cartoony ideas and things that if you want to take your Superman movie remotely seriously, and we're nerds, we do.
Yeah.
You know, it's impossible to with a lot of this movie, but it's got that one junkyard scene which is legitimately fantastic in a lot of ways. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah,
to...
no, I mean, I think that was the biggest thing for me, is that I kind of went into this with low expectations. I kind of went into it knowing its reputation, and I'm like, you know, if it manages to do something right, maybe I'll give it some credit. But I'm not going in with, you know, expecting much of anything. And then we get, like, you know, opening with the slapstick scenes, and then at the an employment office and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not into it. I'm not feeling it. And then just slowly over time, I think I recognized it as an okay comedy, and then that one scene for Superman. And collectively, that puts it at this level where it's not good, like you said, but it is something. It's not just a complete failure of a movie. There is something there. It's just not a good Superman movie.
Yeah. Still better than anything Zack Snyder made, though.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. And also, as much as I agree that the junkyard scene is the bit, I do want to include a little bit of the build up to it, like him acting out of sorts on the lead up to it as well, is also mostly pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that starting with the bar scene, because it goes bar scene, and then Ricky saying, Superman, you can get better, and then it goes to the junkyard scene. I think pretty much all that flows nicely together.
Yeah, I also like the Olympic bit for being funny, but I mean, you know.
True. That is separated by a little distance, though, but I do like it as a moment.
I guess I'm just saying that plot thread in general is what I like the most about the movie. But also, once that gets going, like, Richard Pryor kind of takes a back seat for a while, so when we see him again with the donkey, we're kind of like, oh yeah, you were a thing. You were the main character of the movie almost, and you were missing for like 20 minutes. Final score for Superman 3, what are you rating out of 10?
Well, we've been going on forever, so I won't hem and haw with it. I'm going to end up at a 6. Just a flat 6. That's kind of where I'm feeling with this one. It's like I said, it's something. It's just not a good Superman movie, so it's going to get this weird little middling score to it.
No, I think I agree with the 6, actually. It's not a good Superman movie. I don't even think it's arguably a good movie per se, but it's just, like, it's got enough interesting bad qualities to it, and then a couple of surprisingly great things in the middle, that I find it like a fascinating watch, and I'm never going to just stop at 2, but I'm watching the series, like I'm watching 3. I'm also going to watch 4 as well, to be honest. But I'm not mad at watching this. It's interesting enough, and some of that's nostalgia, but it is a genuinely weird, interesting movie. And I get why some people might hate it. Like, I get why you would hate it. There's a lot of reasons to hate this if you want to have a... I think, like, I'll say this for sure. If this came out now, I would hate it. I would hate that this is what we got as a Superman movie. But it's something that existed before I was already born, and, like, is just there as this weird relic. I think it's fascinating. So, yeah, 6 out of 10.
And then, does it make the cut?
I mean, no. It doesn't.
I think it's riding the line between cutting it close and cut from the collection for me, but I do think it falls into the cut from the collection side of things.
I think I think it's a no, unless you're into, like, the interesting weirdness of it, and then maybe it's cutting it close. But I think that's a hard thing to quantify and say is, like,
right.
Yeah, so I would say no, it's cut. But
that's fair. Yeah.
Hey, and there'll be lots to talk about, and I think the runtime of this is proven that. So,
I was going to say it's a commentary track, but the movie ended like 20 minutes ago.
The movie's only 2 hours long. It's been over for like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
Admittedly, for people watching the YouTube version, you may notice our timing significantly off. Pete, tell them why.
Oh, well, that's because we still do all the extra ratings and picking MVPs and stuff. We just do that as a little bonus segment now for Patreon and YouTube members called the Ratings Rundown. We started doing that a little while ago, but like, we, you know, it's a little bonus video. They've ranged from 10 to 20 minutes depending on the movie. But you can still access that if you're a weirdo who likes all the in-depth ratings of all the different categories. You can find that by supporting us on Patreon. You can also get other things by supporting us on Patreon, which helps keep the show coming, or via YouTube membership, and that is bonus shows that we do. We do 2 monthly shows, me and David. One is Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, and the other is Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies ever made. In fact, if it wasn't part of a franchise, Superman 4 would maybe be a qualifying movie for that show, based purely on its reputation, even though I think it's a much easier watch than a lot of the crap we watch on Extra Reels.
Definitely was for this season, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yes, in fact, we actually did kind of do a tie-in for this season on Extra Reels. June's episode of Extra Reels is Steel, starring Shaquille O'Neal, which is actually a Superman-related character in the comics. So there was a little bit of a tie-in with this month's bonus episode. But yeah, so you can get Extra Reels and Criterion Cut via Patreon or YouTube membership. If you want to just support us with this, like a one-off YouTube super thanks or something like that, you can do that as well. But any support is greatly appreciated, helps keep everything coming. We're very thankful for it. But that does bring an end to the show. Obviously, Superman 4 is up next. The Quest for Peace. We'll find that next time. Actually, the title's kind of funny to me, just because here, and this is specifically a Scotland thing, and not even just Scotland in general, it's like a specific to my area of Scotland, is that another word for sandwich is to say you're having pieces and something. So you'd say, I'm having pieces and bacon. It's like a bacon sandwich, right? Okay. So I hear a quest for peace, and my mind goes a quest for pieces, meaning a search for a sandwich is what my mind goes to. So
okay. That is so oddly specific, but fair.
Oh yeah, it's a weird, very specific, like, you know, west of Scotland bit of slang, but regardless, yeah. So anyway, that's the show, everyone. That's Big Collector's Cut. Thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next time. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.